Hello, beautiful people. I am Oliver Perrin for Semiagog, joined this evening by my very good and very old friend indeed, Jolly Scholar 888, my main man, Gerard. And the subject of our discussion this evening will be esoteric traditions and music in the south of France and in Andalusia. I think Gerard will be drawing on his extensive expertise as regards pilgrimages in southern Spain, his experience with the Rocio and the rest, and we'll be comparing and contrasting that, so far as I understand it, with things in the Camargue, looking at some pre-Christian traditions that arguably survive in some of the Catholic rites and rituals, that sort of thing. So we'll be looking at, I don't know, dancers, processions, bullfighters, bull dancers, crypts with Saint Sarah la Callie, Jardians who move into the sea in processions, and all of these sorts of things. Though I don't fully understand the scope of everything Gerard is going to lay out tonight. So bear with me if I did not nail it down perfectly. Before we get started, please follow this channel, Semiagog, as well as A Safer Space. You can find all sorts of videos that aren't on Semiagog on A Safer Space. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them over on BitChute. God help you. Please subscribe to me on Odyssey. Also follow me on Telegram and on Twitter. I've even got an account lagging along over on Gab for the time being. And for our guest, Jolly Scholar, this evening, you can see links for him below. He's got a website for his own Society for the Study of Music and Ritual Experience.
And the ecstatic experience.
Indeed, as well as a link to his YouTube channel. And I probably forgot to put it in. I'll have to put it in after the stream. But you can certainly follow him over on Twitter as well, though he's sort of on again, off again over there because he's got, unlike me, better things to do.
JollyScholar888.com.
Say again?
The website, JollyScholar888.com.
I have to add that one as well.
A lot of my studies and stuff are on there too.
Okay.
I thought it's kind of a neat.
Excellent. And ladies and gentlemen, can you tell me whether or not my volume and Gerard's volume, relatively speaking, are like they ought to be, and if he is loud enough? If not, I can adjust it over here. How is it sounding, ladies and gentlemen? I'm just watching this. Let me just go ahead and track the pull-out chat here. We'll get started just momentarily. Okay, Noah Solomon in the house. Hello, sir. Says volume's good. Okay, I'm hearing from Alabaster. Hello, sir. That maybe I should crank up G-Man just a little bit. Let me just work this pop-out chat here so I can track it, and then we will get started. StreamYards does not have a proper chat tracking aspect to it. Okay, let me get over here and let me just raise Gerard's volume. And we'll see how that goes. Ladies and gentlemen, tell me if there's any problems with that as we go forward. So, Gerard, thank you for putting up with that long-winded opening nonsense. I'm very, very happy to have you on again. I think everybody here... It's my pleasure to have you, sir. And just so everybody knows, Gerard and I are going to be doing a number of discussions in this series because we have a shared interest in esotericism, and Gerard has a extensive background with music and ritual. He's of course got a PhD in ethnomusicology, which he just sort of put on at the end as a cherry on top after a lifetime of being interested in all these things. He's of course a singer, a flamenco guitarist.
Well, to be really stupid, you have to have a PhD.
Well, there you go.
You got to work at it. It doesn't come easy.
Absolutely. So,
have a conversation with the majority of PhDs in the humanities.
Well, we are definitely going to be doing more of these. That's the main point I wanted to get across. We're going to be looking, certainly at least one more episode is planned, and that's going to be on heterodox Islam, Sufism, heterodox Shiism, and ritual in that respect. But for this evening, we want to look at some things that are arguably pre-Christian as well as Catholic. The connecting threads, as I understand it, are things like gypsies, things like horse breeding, bullfighting, running with bulls, the raising of horses, Camargue horses, as well as the interest is very famous, of course, that Spaniards take in bulls and horses. There's the sea, there's fishermen, there are all sorts of elements here, as well as, proper, whoops, I didn't have to show that. As well as more things that could more properly be described as Catholic religious aspects. But that's as far as I understand it. G-Man, how are you going to weave together for us tonight music and esotericism and the Camargue, which for people who don't know is an area in southern France? I'm sure Gerard will tell us more about it, as well as the Rocio, which is another pilgrimage we're going to be hearing more about. How do you propose to cover all these different aspects and sort of knit it all together for us, brother?
All right. First of all, let's have a toast there to Oliver and his spectacular semiagog.
Oh, well, yeah. I'll be right there with you. Go ahead.
Our channel.
Go ahead and get started without me.
So I'm doing a cinnamon whiskey tonight with my cigar. What are you doing?
Not a cinnamon whiskey, but I love you, so I'm not going to say anything further than that. So go on. Tell me more. Tell me more.
So we're looking at not proving. We're not here to prove or make a big scholarly argument over anything. Anybody who studied Catholicism knows that it's syncretic. This is one of the biggest problems that the Protestants have with Catholicism. But we don't have to wade into that and get into this argument. It's irrelevant because the elements are there. They've been there for centuries, and anybody who's really looked at it knows it. So we're really looking at these two interesting examples, which is the pilgrimage to Marie-sur-la-Mer and the celebration of the Marie-sur-la-Mer, which is two slightly different things because for the Gypsies, it's a pilgrimage to Sarah la Kali, Sarah the Dark, Sarah the Black. We'll talk about that. But it's actually a celebration that's been in the Camargue for a long time. And that's where the Guardians come in and the Marie-sur-la-Mer, the Three Marys. And then we're going to look at Rocio, and we're going to see these uncanny relationships between the two. That there's these symbols, cultural artifacts, cultural practices, which is the most important. They're actual cultural practices. And if you've looked at well, I know you have, we discussed it so much time. I was writing the dissertation at the time. The confusion of studying religion from the point of view of text is what's led to a whole lot of misconceptions, because that's what scholars had, were texts. But if you remember the great collection, The Golden Bough, that got a lot of criticism that he was simply creating a meta myth out of things that perhaps weren't really related, that's a whole nother subject. But one of the main things that he himself, Fraser, came to the conclusion at the end, which they were studying the myth-ritual relationship. Which comes first, myth or ritual? Because they were seeing that these things generated so much culture. Well, he has started off with myth. That's why he's collecting myths. Well, of course, it's easy to collect myths because you're collecting texts, and that's what scholars do. But by the time of his, 10th edition, he admitted that ritual precedes myth, which to many people, that's counterintuitive. They're not enacting myths. It looks that way in what we call symbolic rituals. And that's what I've talked a lot about in my model of the ritual spiral. But that's not what's underneath the ritual system or religion. It is the ecstatic experience, the variations of the ecstatic experience, or as William James called it, the variations of the religious experience. So we're simply talking about El Rocio and Sarah Kali, the Marie-sur-la-Mer. And we're going to explore these symbols they're fascinating. And you're going to come away, well, you've got to think about it, no matter what side you want to come on, as how much Catholicism has brought in, and we'll be discussing that from pre-Christian religions, or how much it has not. I mean, that's a whole nother argument, but we're not really making that argument. We're simply saying, look at the evidence, look what's right in your face. It's irrefutable, and it's fascinating. Your conclusions can be different. So we start off with that Christians, pre-Christian...
Very, very quickly, just so everybody understands, and there's certainly it doesn't really need to be said, but of course that's why somebody like me is going to say it anyway. Nobody here has a negative attitude towards Catholicism. Neither one of us. I would say it's safe to say quite the contrary. But as Gerard said, we've had an interest in this for quite some time, and so much of it, Well, make up your own mind, as Gerard was saying. But very, very quickly, so just I make sure everybody has context. Marie-sur-le-Mer is a coastal, small town, really, on the coast of southern
It's the
France.
capital of the Camargue area.
Yeah, it's basically near lagoons and marshes, right? And
Marshes, exactly. That's marshes
and
and wild horses, or they're feral horses.
but particular breeds that they raise, they have their own kind of saddle as well that is very, very medieval in its construction, and it's still used to this day. They take pride in their horse breeding, and the breed of horses is famous. I mean, they're called Camargue horses. And then they have a ritual that you're going to be talking about that is related. I'm sure you'll go more fully into it, but just to make sure everybody has it, straight out of the gate, there's this idea that Mary, after the crucifixion, fled or in some sense arrived by sea in southern Spain.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. There's a couple of variations on that. Yeah.
And then El Rocio, do you want to just give the quickest 2-sentence summary of El Rocio, just so everybody knows?
Yeah, well, it's a Marian pilgrimage, as really almost all pilgrimages are in the Catholic world. Even Santiago de Compostela, that is linked to Santiago, St. James, is actually a Marian pilgrimage, because it was a Marian apparition that started that. And that's why you have the seashell, as the symbol for that particular pilgrimage, and that's linked with Venus, right? Venus on the half shell, and the ocean, etc. So it was part of what Victor Turner called the shepherd cycle. So a shepherd or a hunter goes into the woods, chasing a rabbit, chasing something,
stag,
or
right?
Lost. A stag. He's usually the shepherd, and it could be the stag, especially in Northern Europe. So he comes across something is catching his eyes, a light, very many variations, and he'll come to a place, and there is situated an image of Mary. And he tries to take the marriage to the town usually, and it goes back, or it's too heavy, they can't. And what it settles down on is it can't be moved. This must be the site of a Marian devotional center. A chapel should be built there, and the pilgrimage should begin. And in Andalusia in Spain, it centers with as the Saracens, as they call them in most of the myths, went back, the impure Saracens, these flowers sprung up all over Andalusia because they were hidden during the Muslim invasion, so as not to be, defiled. And then they sprung up as the Spaniards pushed them back. And of course, the leading figure that was pushing them back was at least the spiritual guidance was Santiago de Compostela, right? They call him Santiago Matamoros, Moor Slayer. And there's a whole story there of why Santiago got so involved with it, right? Because the Saracens burnt down the Santiago de Compostela chapel and took the bells to Toledo, I think. Because, the respect of all people of the book, you know how that goes. So that's the spirit that actually led for the Reconquista with Santiago de Compostela, who's a Marian pilgrimage. So right there, right? And Andalusia is called Tierra de Santa Maria, the land of Holy Mary. So the shepherd finds it. Without going into much detail, there's a whole, in my dissertation, I can also make lists of this. The papers go back to the 1600s, and the whole story. And then the first brotherhoods that were founded, which was between it'll come to me in a second, but they were contested, the two brotherhoods in two towns, and eventually one of them became what they call Hermandad Matriz, which is the matrix, the first brotherhood of which all other brotherhoods then are associated with. They have to come in with their permission. This is very important. We'll see the bottom up process. This is not church doctrine. This is not determined by priests. This is done by brotherhoods.
Yeah, this is this is a major aspect of all your studies, this top-down aspect versus bottom-up, and tying to the experiential aspect. But these hermandades, brotherhoods, I mean, Catholics will probably know they fall under the umbrella of a thing like a sodality, a lay brotherhood of devout people who cooperate in their religious devotion, often with yearly festivals, sponsoring things out of their pockets and the rest. Is there anything you'd add to that?
They are, for the Rocio, when we went on the Rocio, there was what they call the conciliario, which was a priest would come along, not as a hostile agent. They usually loved the guy. He was usually very involved. And I met the Conciliario of Rocio, because he was, from Granada. He came with our brotherhood. And so it's not antagonistic, but the priests are there because this was a time when Catholicism was so rich. If I can give you this example, throughout most of Catholic history, the priest's job was to try to contain this garden that was just overflowing the walls.
Keep your friends closer. Keep the potentially heterodox lay brotherhood. No, keep your friends close. Keep the potentially heterodox lay brotherhoods closer.
Well, it wasn't that it was antagonistic. It's that the job of the priesthood was, and I'll compare it with what it is today. The enthusiasm, the devotion, the love of the people for their religion would just lead them to, create new rituals, and with it create, from experiences, religious experiences, would come doctrines and beliefs that could be seen as extremely heretical at times. So this is always a tension. But the job of the priest, because this garden was so overflowing, was to actually trim it and keep it so it looks Catholic. Whereas now, all the priests are gathered around any little bush that might survive, and they're watering and fertilizing it. And why is that? Because they've gone the doctrinal route. As ritual has been drying up in the Catholic world, replaced by intellectual Catholicism, more and more books, more and more doctrine, that's the death knell. And you'll reach a certain level of threshold where if enough experience is now been leached out of the system, all you get is doctrine. And eventually, as in the Catholic Church today, half of it is ideology, and it's Marxist under the rubric of liberation theology. So it's a whole other story. But here we're seeing the brotherhoods coming together, and it's a myth that went all the way to the New World. And in another video, we could talk about Los Voladores, which is really an interesting ritual, hybrid ritual in Mexico. So anyways, so he finds eventually a chapel is set up. The devotion starts. People begin to come there. The brotherhoods organize, and it generates. And that's one of the things I was going to get to: music and culture. And you're going to see it spreads to the rest of society and the rest of the culture, as we're going to experience here with the rumba lenta of the Gypsy Kings that comes right out of the Sara Kali pilgrimage, and the famous Sevillanas Rocieras, which dominated during the 70s and 80s a lot of the whole Andalusian culture, but also spread beyond, even to South America. So,
one quick thing, would you say it's fair to say that this should be of particular interest to people on the right who are particularly concerned with erosion of culture? I bring this up because it seems to me that your theories have to do with the generation of culture out of living religious traditions, which is to say that you don't have to fear if everything is lost. I mean, of course, we want to preserve everything we can, but to a certain extent, we will generate new rituals and new traditions out of this direct experience.
If the ecstatic experience is cultivated, that's going to be one of my major themes. If it's not, and you're going to rely on doctrines and ideology, you're going to go down the same road as the Marxists, because ideologies cannot generate culture. It's a semiotic problem. It's like an iron law. It cannot happen. And they will implode within a generation or two, which is what we're seeing, unless they transfer, as they all do when they manifest anyways, to fascism or national socialism. So while we're there, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me just mention something quickly. I've mentioned a lot of my videos. China is a Nazi state. I don't mean by Nazis. I mean National Socialist state. They didn't start out that way. They went to the Cultural Revolution where they tried to destroy all previous Chinese culture. And what happened? They realized, holy shit, we're catastrophically failing. We're going to completely collapse if we keep this up. So they started to reinstituting Chinese culture and celebrating it, because they knew, I don't know if they knew it consciously, but they figured out, A, you'll alienate the people, but B, you cannot sustain culture. You can't generate culture. So if you look at Chinese television, used to be on cable prevalent here. And I used to watch it. And there's two themes that they loved. One of them, ancient China. Now this is coming from communist China, celebrating the Qin dynasty and the rise of the Qin and the endless stories. They loved it. And then the second one was their hatred of Japan. So they would go over and over the Japanese invasion. So you can see that nationalism. So China has controlled capitalism. They have an ethnic identity, which is the Han people. And anybody who doesn't understand that does not understand that what they're trying to do in Europe will never be done to China. China will never allow a mass immigration to erode their Han peoples. The peoples Han will remain the Han. They will never allow that. So you have exactly what fascism or national socialism is defined at. State control, it's socialism with state control capitalism, you have it. State control religion. The Chinese have Taoism is now a state religion. So is Christianity, by the way. Catholicism is very big. Christianity is very big. Taoism. Those three are state sponsored. As many of you may know, they did a deal with I don't know if they got him to agree with this or not. I believe he did, knowing this so-called Pope St. Francis, that the Chinese party will appoint the bishops. This is how involved they are and how concerned they are with Christianity. And by the way, they do accept Buddhism, but not Tibetan Buddhism. And I saw that in the universities. I went here to the universities about 10 years ago. I was at a conference for the first time ever, right? You always heard all the liberals with, the ways of the East, the wisdom of the East, Buddhism. Well, for the first time ever, I saw two papers. I personally sat through two papers, who knows how many there were, that were ridiculing not Buddhism, all Buddhism, only Tibetan Buddhism in China.
So like all these professors, all these tenured professors, as soon as the Chinese money comes in, they're out in the parking lot scratching off their free Tibet stickers. Right.
No problem. We'll vilify it. So that's what I'm saying. Yes. And we're going to have examples in these right here, these two examples that are just two of cultural generation arising from especially pilgrimage. And of course, those of you who have looked into the Göbekli Tepe theory that's now coming out, that the origins of civilization, interestingly enough, the cities began by by tribal peoples, semi-nomadic and nomadic, coming together for pilgrimage and religious rituals and experience, and then disbanding, coming together, expanding. And with time,
which would basically give you you couldn't call it properly sedentary, but you would have a fixed point around which the people congregate prior to agriculture.
And what happened is that it evolved a kind of priesthood that then stayed there growing crops, preparing for the next pilgrimage. In other words, these are all theories, but it's still fascinating that the oldest site they've come across, and now there's groups of them. It's not necessarily just Göbekli Tepe, but what they are saying is that they were all what we would call pilgrimage sites. And you can go on and on with this, or why do we have this instinct to go on vacation and travel, right? Sedentary travel,
and for that, for anyone who is interested in that subject of processions specifically, Gerard and I have already done a stream on that subject, which overlaps in many respects with this, but in it we did not, because of time, have the ability to go into details on these aspects that Gerard will be covering this evening. Okay, so carry us off to. Are you going to start with Camargue or with Rocio or general considerations?
Yeah, let's start off with something. I'm always really loving visuals and sound. I'd like to show a short little clips of a video that I put together in Spain. Now, the quality is very bad because the good high-8 tapes, it's a long story. These have been copied, but that's okay. You'll get the idea. It's very simple. I'm simply trying to demonstrate to you in a nutshell this spiral that I talk about of experience and representation. It starts off, and I'm going to do the Mass part. People are familiar with the Catholic Mass. It's structured. There's so much time. This happens, and then it's go in peace. Mass is over, go in peace. You had a great revelation. You spoke with God, great. You fell asleep in the corner, great. It's still over. It's done. And everybody leaves. That's not to devalue the Mass, because every great saint that's ever had a powerful experience, I've never found one that had the experience at Mass. But what they tell you is they go back to the Mass and they realize the profundity of the symbolism there. And that's what its purpose was, because the Mass used to be the mother ritual of the entire Catholic system. And it was very long, very experiential, and through the centuries has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter as it becomes more and more symbolic. However, and doctrine is explicated. However, as it grows, as it moves towards myth, it generates rituals in its wake that take up, if you could put this into like a mathematical formula, as this approaches, say 1, it say a certain number, it has to add up to maybe infinity. And so as it approaches the smaller and smaller symbolism, a plethora of experiential rituals grow to take up the balance. And that's how come we have 2,000 years of Catholicism. It's not from books and doctrine. That's a big part. It's because it's hard for us to imagine how the medieval person lived day to day from ritual to ritual to ritual. And they were profound and they were ecstatic. They were fun. You're going to see that with Rocio because it's a de gloria ritual, which means it's glorification. So unlike a penitential that tends to be, the sad, more self-introspective, this is completely party time, party, sing all day, drink, don't get drunk, but drink and party and celebrate. And so that's a part that a lot of people don't understand about Catholicism because they haven't been, these kind of rituals don't even exist anymore in the United States and hardly ever in Europe. But we're going to see, that's one of the things I want to explicate here. So this little video, I'll skip the mass part. Again, the mass is very important. I'm not diminishing that. Then we go to, you'll see them going through the streets. This lets you know that the culture embraces them, which is why it's disappeared most places, because it doesn't anymore. They're going through the streets, they're singing, they're bringing the carreta, the cart of the Virgin, which we will discuss because it's extremely symbolic. And then you're going to see a part that's going to be a little bit jarring to many people. You're really not going to see much. What you're going to see, you're going to hear cacophony, people yelling, and a bell churning, noise, cacophony. You're going to see it's dark, it's at night, and my camera flips over because I got knocked over several times. I had to get back up, and then you'll see things start to appear again. That's what I'm going to talk about, the deep experiential level, which is still not at the level of a saint going off and, say, fasting for 40 days or going through, risking going insane until he finally can find for that revelation. But this is going in that direction where people can follow and instill certain numbers. Most human beings are not cut out to go that deeply into the meditation, to sit under the tree as Buddha did and say, look, I'll either die or become enlightened, because he was almost starved to death as it was. Right? We're not talking about
anchorites or stylites. Right.
Jesus, 40 days and 40 nights fasting. You could die, There's no guarantee. These are rituals of experience. You could die, you could go crazy. So this is going in that direction. Nobody dies, nobody gets hurt, but it's intense. And it was kind of scary, to tell you the truth.
And just to give everybody context for this, unless there's some reason that you want to hold off on it, and tell me if you do. As I understand it, with Rocio, you have different brotherhoods from different regions of Spain. Yeah. And over a particular period, 12 days?
I'm going to go back to that. I'm kind of like opening it up with a little spectacular visual. And then, yes, gotcha. We'll definitely need to cover that. So, if you will, I'm going to do, I experimented with this, and I think I know how to do it.
Ole! Vamos allá!
There it is. Okay, here it is. They're leaving the mass, right? This is not the big chapel that the Brotherhood particularly goes to, which I have a long history, a really interesting story about, but that's for some other time. They are leaving the mass. The mass is over, and it's a mass celebrating the fact that the Rocieros are going on the pilgrimage to El Rocio. What you see here is the banner of Our Lady of El Rocio, which we'll talk about the meaning of the word Rocio, and she'll be put into a cart, which we'll see later, and that's very symbolic, the cart pulled by the 2 oxen, etc., etc. But they're leaving now, and the whole mass was done with Sevillanas Rocieras being sung. So you can see already that experiential rituals come back to affect and enrich the religion itself.
Even to the point, to your prior point, even to the extent that they literally are beginning as they come out of Mass. To your earlier point about Mass sort of spawns these experiential rituals, it's literally happening as they walk out of Mass, right?
Exactly. The Mass is still the center of Catholicism. They're not questioning that, but they want to experience deeper levels of their religion. So they conducted the mass, and the music of the mass was all Rocio music. So you can see this big circle. As a Rocio grew, affected culture at all levels of Andalusian society, you eventually get the music actually penetrating into the mass. And the church hierarchy say, yes, this is very good, we love it. And so there they are, they're leaving. So now we're going to see, here they are now going down the middle of I'm not sure what town we're in at this time. It might have been Villa Manrique, which is important. That was the second brotherhood that I was talking about. Almonte was the first brotherhood, but in Manrique, actually, Villa Manrique had some claims to being that whether or not the shepherd or the hunter was from Villa Manrique or Almonte. So this is just, it's just little trivial things, and it's fun. But anyways, it was settled that it's Almonte. So here we go. They're going through one of the towns on the way. And you'll see right away, everybody is singing. It's very beautiful. It's really ecstatic. It's something people don't associate with Catholicism. And I have lots of scenes of dancing and singing, but it's short of time. So here they are going through the streets. And of course, the town is welcoming them. Now they're singing the Granada kind of theme song. I don't know if you could tell that. So then we'll go here where they're crossing the river Quema. They're entering into the aldea, which is where the area that's the kind of sanctified area of La Doñana, which you can interpret, it's named after a duchess, but La Doña, the lady. So they're going into there, and they cross the river Quema, and that's where I was given my little, it's not real serious, but a little baptism. And I received my name, Don Quixote de la Marisma, Don Quixote of the marshes. So you can see how marshes is also a big theme there. So here's that, I think. Yeah, there we go. This is the Brotherhood of Sevilla.
You have to show this where they're crossing the river. This is
Now all that music you're hearing is the people up on the ridge with drums and everything singing. It's so loud that's how my camera caught it, like you would think I had a microphone or something. There's no microphone, it's just the camera. Now here comes Granada. That's the brotherhood I was a member of. And I am a member.
And this is their carreta. Each one has their own that they lavish attention upon.
Exactly. You'll notice that Sevilla Sur, this is Sevilla Sur, look how theirs is decorated differently. I'm not familiar with the symbolism, but our carretas definitely has Moorish, because Granada was the last holdout of the Moors and is famous for the Alhambra castle. So you see here the Moorish kind of designs around the carreta, and inside is the Virgin. And I was very lucky. They let me actually, when they were paraded through one city, I got to carry the banner of the Virgin, and it's housed inside. So then we go here. Now, can you hear the flute and drum?
Yeah, it's the tamborilero.
Now that is the tamborilero, the drummer is called, but he plays a flute, a three-hole flute, and a drum at the same time. And that rhythm is cojo. It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's fives.
It's fives. It's very curious. You would think, why would people walk to that? Actually, when you do it, you see that the downbeat switches side to side, and it works pretty nicely.
Right. That's a thing consistently. Like even when trying to dance to an odd count rhythm, you find out that it keeps you from being, for example, right side dominant, because the downbeat keeps shifting from one side of your body to the other. Yeah. So it actually has its own sort of ritual programming qualities, if you will.
Yeah. And then the melody is what they call open-ended. That way he can be playing in procession, and there's places for him to stop. Unlike a fixed melody, everybody recognizes that melody. It's so obvious. But he can stop it at any time according to the movement or start it. And wherever you hear that melody, you know the Virgin is behind you. Now, I have a whole lot to say about that, maybe here, maybe some other place, but the tamborilero has a long history in European culture, all over Europe. This is the last place where he's still a vibrant ritual performer. He was also in the courts in the past. He was also the court musician.
And as I recall, he's literally playing the drum and the flute at the same time.
Yeah, the drum is over his hand. He has the flute in the left hand, usually, and there's 3-hole flute, and he just holds it like this with his mouth, and then with the other hand, the right hand, he's beating out the beat. And he'll play not just this. I mean, you're going to see he's going to be playing for Sevillanas, and everybody's dancing to it in just a minute.
Right, and this is in effect they're fording a river here, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's shallow, called the river Camargue. And in the river, where the baptisms take place. And that's where I was baptized. They called me down. I was filming from up here, and then they said, Gerardo, come down. And I came down there, and I was baptized, and I got my Rocio chain and all that.
And so they're literally crossing the countryside. They're not on roads. They're like traveling in rolling like RVs and caravans.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Exactly. And these carretas are made only they're like our RVs, but they're pulled by tractors. It's a riot. And so Granada, at first we take the highways, but once we get to the Doñana, then we get off of the RVs, for better word, the trailers. And each trailer is different. Each one is individually made by a maker, a carreta maker, and the family specifies it. They'll have like balconies on the front and the back so they can wave and show off their cool clothes. But here, once we hit the Doñana, everybody's on foot. And we're
lots of crowds of fucking perfectly dressed horsemen as well on horseback, right? And so
they have
over
both.
12 days.
They have two kinds. They have the more campesino dress, and you can't tell. This could be a wealthy person in the campesino dress with a shirt and the cap, and then they'll have the really cool guys dressed up in their what they call the traje corto, which we can put some pictures up of them too. Yes, exactly.
I just want everybody to understand these people are like crossing the countryside over a 12-day period, building up towards reaching this center point, right?
Yeah, and they come from all around. Some people longer. Sevilla's only like a half day away, a day away. We are 8 full days. So I've been on the road this is going on 6 or 7 days here. Isn't that a riot? That's Sevilla. This is a wagon train. They didn't have the kind of RVs pulled by tractors. They actually came in these wagons are pulled by cows actually. Now,
and just so people understand, these are not gypsies. I mean, there might be a few peppered in, but these are Spanish Catholic Europeans, right?
Well, they're actually from all Spain, but yeah, Andalus. These are Spaniards. This is totally Spaniard. This is not a gypsy a gypsy pilgrimage. There are gypsy pilgrimages. This is not one of them. And the Hermandad of Huelva, which I have tons of film of, when they came in, they had something like 1,000 horsemen and wagons pulled by mules, and it was, 1,000 horsemen and women. They call it, there's lots of women on the horsebacks too. If we want, I can show you pictures of that. But so here we are. They're crossing. That's Sevilla. I think that was the tail end of Sevilla.
I hope they take a photo.
Now we stop at what they call the rengue. You'll see behind the dancers those carretas I'm talking about, all decorated different colors. And what you see when you see a windshield, that's actually a tractor. They pull in. They're really good at this, and they line them up in this. This is all Granada. We're pulled in to the left. If you look to the left of what you're looking at, to the left was the sin pecado, what they call it, without sin, the carreta of the Virgin of the Rocio, and they station it there. But you'll love this. To the right was the Alhambra Castle Beer Company, and the Alhambra is the famous castle in Granada, and so they accompanied us the whole way there. So you could always stop while you're walking, and when they're coming by. And to the right, you'll see that when they're parked, they have they're standing up there, and there's like a shelf that folds down. And so if you're on foot, you come up and you can order your beer Well, you don't pay. They just give it out. They're giving it free. But if you come on horse, it's high enough that the horseman just reaches out and they give him a beer.
Nice. And also, I can't help but notice every single clip that you've turned on at this point, as soon as it comes on, there's music in the background, live at all times.
It's hard to find any clips that don't have music. It's going on continuously. What I want to emphasize here is, again, people don't associate with Catholicism. They're so happy, it's almost a little unnerving for people like us. When they start the Rocio, these people are ecstatic. It's like one of the highlights of their life, even though most of them grew up and they do it every year. For me, this was my first one. And it was like being in a wonderland. I mean, I'll compare it with Burning Man at some time, but really the Rocio is more.
Don't you dare. Yeah.
No, Burning Man has its points. It's you can compare it also at a level of purpose, what it serves as. So we'll get to that some other day. But yeah, you could see the happiness here. And that's it. When I first got into the carreta with the family that brought me along, they all of a sudden are dancing with each other and singing. And I felt a little comfortable, almost like a spy. Like here, I'm witnessing this ecstatic happiness, and I'm just sitting here to gawk. I felt a little uncomfortable, but with time, I was fine. So there she is. You can see the happiness on her face. It's crazy. Okay, so now we get to, before you start thinking these are just slap happy people. Oh no. The Andalusians are very structured, very serious, and you don't want to mess with them. Like they say, el andaluz es bueno hasta que se pone malo. He's great, he's good until he becomes bad. So
okay, one quick thing. You must respond to this here, because I think that nothing could be further from the truth. There was a person saying, "This is Islamic culture to me, not Catholic." What do you say to that?
Insane. What he's talking about is Shia rituals that do some flagellation. There's no flagellation here. This is so European. It's crazy. You can trace, that's what we're going to talk about. You can trace this all over Europe. This is not even unique to Andalusia. It's just that Catholicism remained very strong in Andalusia because of the Civil War, because of Franco, and people can hate Franco, but other people love him, and a lot of gypsies liked Franco, by the way. Let's not go there.
Yeah, and I'm going to just go ahead and add
that not Islamic. That is crazy. Plus,
yeah,
these are you crazy? They're bringing images and venerating images. This is what the Muslims hate about Catholicism. Is the image.
Also, I lived in a fucking Muslim country, and the idea that this is in any respect Muslim or Moorish is absolutely fucking preposterous.
Was that person Muslim who said that? Because no Muslim would say that. They know better.
Yeah.
This was some non-Muslim guy, right?
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so moving right along.
That is so stunningly messed up that you really have to wonder, who's Jesus? If you know anything about Islam, you know how this could not possibly be that. Okay, right. So now you're going to see things get crazy. You're going to hear a bunch of noise. You're not going to see much. What you're seeing here is the Virgen del Rocio up close. This is her image now that's been brought out of the chapel. This is not our little version in the carreta. This is the one that they come to venerate. It's in the chapel. When they take her out, that's another massive thing that looks like a mosh pit. And this looks like a mosh pit. So what you're going to see now...
But it's just for context, because people don't know this. Basically, and you are going to cover this, I would imagine, later, but they really need to understand at least this about it. Each one of these brotherhoods has, by tradition, created their own image of the Virgin to put in the carreta, and they're treated...
It's a banner with her image on it, and it's unique to their brotherhood.
There's not a statue in the carreta?
No, it's a banner.
Okay. So, in each one of those carretas with the banner upon it, bearing her image, they all converge on this town of Rocio, and each one of them has their own like little carreta stall set aside for them. And so all of these images come together.
No, they have the brotherhoods. That's a lengthy discussion there. The older brotherhoods have houses that, like Granada, that we stayed at, and then the house will have, like you say, a stall, the gate, and their particular carreta will be ensconced there, and they'll back it up. I have videos showing us actually getting it in, and getting the bulls, the ox to cooperate was a little bit difficult that day. And then the new brotherhoods have to share with the older, because the other brothers are bringing them in. So there's constantly new brotherhoods coming into
But there
being.
is the idea of these different images coming from all different directions, and then sort of the primary image. And that primary image of the Virgen of Rocio, that's the one that comes out at this point.
Yes, and she's been out now late into the night. This is late into the night. And when she comes out, the Brotherhood of Almonte storms the chapel. They jump over the railing, and they, in a swarm, you should see the videos of it, and they lift her up, and they swarm her over the railing and back down and into the streets. And this is a big, big deal. People they stay up all night, and they're shooting off fireworks, and the brotherhoods are marching through. Well, Almonte comes in a big procession. And then here they've been going through the streets. There's people underneath it holding it. And my God, it's just pandemonium. And they have to relieve them. Another team has to come in. Otherwise, people would suffocate in there. And that's what's happening here, actually. So you're going to hear people going, fuera, fuera. He's saying, get away, get away. We need to, the thing is getting unstable, which I'll talk about. That's kind of a game they play. It never falls, never. But it looks like it sometimes. And so you're going to hear noise and stuff, and you're going to see the camera go bananas. And that's one of the times that I was knocked over. Now here you see something interesting too. She's associated with healing and the brotherhood, the people coming together. There's two guys there embracing each other. Evidently they came there because they wanted to touch the Virgin. And once they accomplished that, they were ecstatic, and they're sitting there hugging and crying, holding each other.
So can you just cover clearly what it is that's happening from a religious participant's perspective at this point? Why are they like this? What is the process of what is going on in terms of the ritual sequence at this point?
Well, let's look at the culmination of the whole Rocio. After days, there's all kinds of ceremonies and rituals once you get there for 3 days. And the last night, the big culmination, and it stretches into the morning, and we'll talk about what happened. There's an interesting thing they do there. But this will go on all night. She's paraded to all the brotherhoods, all through the streets of Almonte, of the Rocio. There's now a little town there around the chapel. And then Almonte is the city of the brotherhood, where they're a few kilometers away. So they're in the city of the Rocio, the town. By the way, it looks like a cowboy town. It's the largest. You'll never see more horses in one place in your life, or very few times. And there's places to tie your horses at. There's carriages and horses riding all night long. People sipping manzanilla and riding their horses, and then singing and dancing coming out of every single of the brotherhood houses. And so now this is the culmination. So she's going to be carried around through the entire town. Call it a town, it's sort of a town, and to every house of every brotherhood. And this is what goes on. People follow it, and people try to touch it, and then the brotherhood of Almonte has to keep people away from just it getting completely out of hand. And it's ecstatic. That's all I can tell you. That's like they say. Let me ask me that again. Well, I'll tell you. I asked. I was playing the professor, right? And I was sitting there going. I sat down with one of the ladies of La Curra, which we became really good friends with this carreta that was all women and one guy. And I'm sitting there, and she took me to one of the most interesting houses that the music was so interesting and everything was fascinating there. And I'm sitting there interviewing her, and I made the mistake of asking, what what does the Rocio mean to you? And she just rolls her eyes and go, oh, please put that paper away. Don't ask. Just go experience. So it's kind of like what I have to say. Why are they doing this? Well, you go there and you'll feel it.
Fair enough.
Tell me. But those two guys are embracing and in tear, you know, having a big moment. Okay, so there we just finished tracing the symbolic to the experiential, but not to the further level, which is the hermit, the saint, the cloistered people who will then go and pray for the rest of their lives or meditate. Okay, that's another level, and fewer and the number of people get fewer and fewer until you finally, you know, in times of history, only one person will, like a Jesus, like a Buddha, like a Muhammad, and then people will gather around them, and then the cycle starts again. But here, this is for group ecstatic experience in the Catholic tradition. This is the deepest I've seen as far as group goes. I think there's like 200,000 at the height, people coming to the Rocio by the time that I, in the 70s, became the largest procession pilgrimage in all of Spain. And I guess we'll talk about the music became very famous, but this is still something that many people can participate in, feel it to the degree that it's satisfying or whatever, or just get scared, who knows. But then I think any level deeper, you're talking about going on into meditation, becoming a hermit, going into weeks long of fasting and prayer. But this for group, this is pretty, as you can see, it's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's very different from it, for example, from most American, Sunday Christians, right? This is something where they're
not if you go to evangelicals, and not if you go to charismatics. They're a little bit closer to this. Not this. They won't get this. Well, they were the snake handlers after all.
No, but I just meant more like your sort of bland textbook, Sunday Christian. Certainly not like Shape Note singers or something like that.
Well, it's what's happened to Catholicism. You see, that beautiful mass that you would say is, it's contained, beautiful singing, music. It's all lovely. Well, they go to that too. What's lacking here is that we have the beautiful singing, the church, all that, but we don't have this. We don't have the going down into the levels of experience. That's why Catholicism is dying in Europe and dying in here in America. It's not because of a lack of doctrine, a lack of strategy. It's very simple. If people don't have the religious experience to different degrees, they will not generate culture. They will not feed the church. The church cannot survive on myth and doctrine and intellectualism. The closest thing they have now is people, and I did a whole study on that. We can talk about it with volunteers going into the inner cities and doing their do-good actions. It's a poor substitute. It'll go for a generation or so, but that doesn't cut it. This does. And then you say, well, what the hell is that? It looks crazy. Okay. I'm not going to answer that. In fact, I'm not even going to deny that it looks crazy. In fact, I freaked out once. A guy came up to me on my second time there, and I'm so sorry now that I was getting a little paranoid about, because there's a time when explosions were going on and stuff all over and I also felt that I was, was I welcomed by the I hate to say it this way, but was I welcomed by the Virgin? I mean, I don't know. Here I am, I'm taking my pictures, I'm doing my movies. And a guy comes up to me who I realized in retrospect, he wanted me to make him a testimony. I didn't film him. I just talked to him, and you could tell he was kind of frustrated. The guy looked wild. He freaked me out a little bit. He was kind of foaming at the mouth, and he was trying to tell me about the experience that he had. And he was telling me, and he was, like this. I mean, he looked like he was a little crazed. And I didn't film him, which I should have in retrospect. But at the moment, I was kind of debating with myself. Is it okay? I'm Catholic, but I'm not practicing. I'm not on the loose. I'm not, and the people have been very good to me. I mean, but like I said, I was feeling a little weird, and I didn't film him. And actually, in retrospect, I see it as actually Mary saying to me, yeah, you're welcome here. Here, here's take advantage of it. Show the world. And so I can tell you about it, but I can't show you the video.
Now we are coming up on 1 hour for this one. And I imagine we can set aside an hour for the second one and maybe a little bit of extra time. So so you're tracking on how much time you have, given, what ground you have to cover.
Oh yeah. I'm just gonna do a little music. I think I've said enough about that. We could go on about the brotherhoods, but I think for them to get the idea that it's experientialism and it generates massive cultures. It generated cuisine, style of dress. If we got, would you say another 5 minutes here? And then music.
More. You're not limited in that sense. I just wanted to give you a rough heads up. I don't want to make you feel like you're under the gun. But I would ask, in terms of this, specifically with Rocio, what are the core ritual elements you see that you think that we should be aware of and that might be of interest to those of us who are concerned, for example, with the idea of generating culture once again?
There's no formula for this. It means that people have to go deeply inside and seek out the truth, seek out experience of the divine. I hate to put it that way, but I didn't start out that way.
Basically, it comes through God.
Yes, the divine. However you want to interpret it, you must seek it. And if you think that you can start a movement purely on ideology, you can have like something like communism, and the results will be a generation or 2, 3, 4. Remember, this is 2,000 years. And then you also look at Russia as soon as the Bolshevik Revolution came into play. What happened to the fantastic literature, music, Rimsky-Korsakov, my favorite, Scriabin. We could go on and on. The writers, Dostoevsky. I mean, look at the literature, how profound it was. Gone. One generation, gone. They've never produced anything of that equal sense. I saw it in Cuba with the music. Never. So on the Rocio, I would like to play. One of the things that came out of the Rocio was called the Sevillanas Rocieras. I won't search out the video now, but this is what I called informal rituals, right? They're the big ones where everybody participates in, like when they do the chanting of the all the brotherhoods gather, and there's the chanting of the rosary. There's with all the brotherhoods make their devotion to Mary, and they bring any brotherhood that's coming aboard. They bring them with them to present them. This is very elaborate, very organized. But I was really fascinated by being with the Hermandad, the inside, seeing the informal rituals that then can become ritual. And so one of them was, I could see where the Sevillanas Rocieras came from. And at night, late at night, the carreta would be lit up and people would come throughout the night, and we would pray, but instead they would sing. And so they're singing Sevillanas Rocieras. And as you know, a Sevillanas is right? That's the typical dancing Sevillanas from Sevilla. But that's not when you go late at night, they started stretching it out. So they would have these melodies would go slow, and sometimes they would dance real slow. Sometimes they would be beating the drum much slower. And then they would do without the dance eventually and just get to singing and really heartfelt. And it started to sound like, what a saeta is, the devotional songs that are sung during Holy Week, these profoundly deep songs. And of course, there's no rhythm there. And they just go, the person just lets, they're structured still. I mean, the people know what they're doing. But you stretch it. And finally, they arrived at something called the Sevillanas Rocieras, which then became hugely popular. Now, they also did the Sevillanas Rocieras up fast, and so the discotheques now started dancing Sevillanas Rocieras. But they also had the campfire Sevillanas, which are the slower ones. And then it went on, and I want to show this one song because the words are profound. This is by a guy named Miguel Pareja Obregón, and I'll have a link to him. I'm going to read the last lyrics later, the last copla. But you can see now that it starts to even affect social. I don't want to say political, because they're adamant about there's no politics at the Rocio, but social in the universal sense. And I'll give you that example in a second. And I just want you to hear a few bars of, this is called El Flor del Romero Llora, the flower which is rosemary. The flower of the pilgrimage of pilgrims all over Europe is rosemary. So
rosemary
here I
for
go.
remembrance.
It has a lot of symbolism. By the way, it means dewdrop in the ocean, which will tie into the Virgin of the Dew here. You'll see. Hopefully, I'll get to that. Okay, so now you can see that this is not dancing music at all. Okay, so I've got it up there, old boy. Oh, no, I don't. No, I don't. I've got to share it with you, right? Okay. I had this down, believe me. I had it down. No, take that off. Present. Stop screen. Okay, there we go. There we go. Share screen. La Flor del Romero. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's Manuel Pareja Obregón.
La flor del romero llora. La flor del romero a sola llora cuando ve que cortan margarita y amapola. La flor del romero llora.
Okay, so I know you're concerned with copyright and whatnot,
Right.
but you get the idea. It's a beautiful devotional song you would not see at a Sevillanas festive, right? You would probably not even recognize that this is a Sevillanas. But anybody who knows Sevillanas will follow it and realize it is. It's a Sevillanas. There's 4 coplas. And I also want to now bring in the depth. I mean, the profundity of a lot of them is really, they're very beautiful, but here's where it also becomes not just cultural, but social. Now, this music is famous all over Spain and even a lot of it in South America. There's a song, El Amigo. Algo se muere en el alma cuando el amigo se va. You probably recognize that song, right? Maybe not, but that's sung a lot. It's even famous in South America. That's a Rocio song. But here's the words to this at the end. This is the 4th copla, the 4th verse. God wanted to create flight. He wanted to create flight. That's why he gave wings to the birds of the night. God wanted to create flight. He also made the heavenly skies expanding over the world to spread the seeds upon the winds. He also made the heavenly skies. That's why people in chains fight with valiant spirit, because like the birds of the sky, the people were born to be free.
Well, I can see why they like it in South America. Yeah.
Well, I know this is very on the loose. I don't know that people in South America knew it as well, but again, it's not meant to be political. It's meant to be the spirit of the human is meant to be free.
Right. And indeed, certainly mine is. Yes.
So any questions, then we can talk more about the symbolism of the rosemary, right? On the term.
Right. I just remembered the line I just did from what was it, Hamlet, I guess, where it's associated with remembrance. But I'm thinking that possibly, maybe because we should talk about, possible pre-Christian themes in some of this stuff, but it would seem most appropriate maybe to do that at the end after we've looked at both of them. Does that work for you?
Yes, they're all through here. Yes. Okay, so then would you rather then we move to Sarah Lacali?
Saint Sarah Lacali, Marie sur la Mer. Yes, some dog French from me.
I thought it was pretty good.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Anyone who speaks French probably would feel differently, but yeah. So you gonna plug in another video, or is there an introduction?
First, we could do a little bit, I think, of everybody's familiar with the Gypsy. Well, probably not in this group. No, I'll bring that up in a minute.
You should probably give a context for them as musicians, and for the whole thing. Remember, start from scratch.
For the myth. In the Camargue, which is famous for its Camargue horses, and we're going to talk about the Guardians, who are this tradition of men on horseback with a three-pronged spear, which Oliver claims is actually the fleur-de-lis was modeled after. Well, it's not provable, but it's a goad because they do horses and they do bulls. They're the Guardians. They were white horses, and it's the horses of the Camargue. In the Rocio is also known for the horses, also known for, like the Camargue, the marismas, which are the marshlands. There's the saca de yeguas, which is when the mares are gathered up. So in the same way, there's a groups of caretaker, what we would call cowboys, that look after the herd, even though they're basically feral. The same thing with the Camargue Guardians. Then, so in the Camargue, there's the capital is Marie sur la Mer. It's been there since Roman times. We don't need to go into too much detail about all that, but it's a very old town. Started the Romans, and probably before that was Celtic. So the myth goes like this. Joseph of Mary, there were three Marys that were at the tomb of Christ, and they were there where the angel came out and they revealed that Christ had risen. So they were Mary Magdalene, Mary Salome, and Mary of Clopas, the three Marys. They're the ones with the empty tomb, blah, blah, blah. The Christians were being persecuted by the Jews at the time, the Jewish hierarchy, and along with Joseph of Arimathea, they say some with Joseph of Arimathea, all others say just the three of them. They got on a little boat that was a rickety-rack little thing, and still miraculously ended up on the coast of France. Okay, on the coast of France, now is where we get, was Sarah Lacali. Sometimes she's called Sarah the Egyptian, that she was an Egyptian servant of one of the three Marys. That's one view. The other view is that no, she was some kind of priestess, powerful woman that lived what we call Sarah Marie sur la Mer. She had a premonition that people would need her help that were important, and she came out to the ocean. And so the myth goes on about what happened next, but eventually she is responsible for actually saving them and bringing them ashore. So in one interpretation, she's the servant of one of the three Marys, I think Mary Chloe. In the other one, she is actually an ancient priestess of Celtic religion, probably. This will come in.
She subsequently come to be venerated by the Gypsies as a particular sort of saint for them, right?
That's where we're getting to. So when the ceremonies come, there's Mary Magdalene went north to Marseille. So when they actually do the ritual, there's two Marys, the Mary Chloe and the Mary Salome. And they something in the 15th, 14th century, they found their relics, bones, and so they're in caps. They're contained in a kind of trunk. And interestingly enough, this is a Taurus trunk. It's got bull carvings on it. The word that's used, let me see if I get to it here. There's a kind of scientific word for it. I'll get it here. Taurorian, something like that trunk, but it just means of the bull cult. And they're associating possibly even with the cult of Mithras, which you see his picture with bulls all the time. So
yeah, one of the ideas is that the particular little chamber that the image of Saint Sarah Lacali is kept in is actually an old Mithraeum. And I did check in Spain as well. There are some, even in Sevilla, there is likely an old Mithraeum there.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's likely that there was some Mithraic
Well, the
aspect.
bull part is actually the kind of altar. They're not sure. Altar kind of container, and that's where the relics of the other two Marys are. But yes, they're kept down there. Well, they're not. They're kept up in a kind of the nave.
Yeah, above
So
and
they
or
roll it
lower.
down with chains, and gypsies come to venerate that part too, even though that does not involve Sarah Kali directly. Lots of gypsies come to it, and lots of the local French people. So this is a pilgrimage of gypsies and the French. Then down in the crypt is the statue of Sarah La Kali. Do you have any pictures of her you'd want to put up? I can put one up if you like. Do you have one? Or do you want me to?
No. I'm sorry. I was muted when I told you no. If you have one, plug it in. Basically, it's just it's carved wooden imago, right? Of a very dark-skinned woman.
Yes. Well, we're actually gonna probably see her in one of the videos, but here we go.
Gandaval Bekase tra la 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 la. Yes, Noah Solomon. I know it is Breton.
Yeah, it's not French. It's Breton. So, funny enough, I know how to do all this, but when it comes to like a picture, you think that'd be the easiest.
Well,
thing.
let me see if I can find one very quickly. I should be able to share a window. Saint Sarah.
Yeah, it'd be better than me trying to pull up a picture. It's easier to just.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a brief wardrobe malfunction. Let me see if I can pull up one of these that's big. Open image in a new tab. Let me see. Here we go. I can share this. Sorry, I'm not all that fast myself. Share screen. Share window. That is Saint Sarah La Kali.
And so she's down in the crypt, and this is the gypsy patron saint of a lot of Western Europe and even Eastern Europe, and as we'll find out, also in Spain, because that's why the Reyes, one of the reasons the Reyes family of the Gypsy Kings, which is a story that we'll get to. So we have these elements of the horses, the bulls, the marshes. We have the rosemary, the Virgin of the Dew. The Rocio is called the Dew, and it's Pentecostal. It's 50 days after the when the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles.
On the apostles, right?
So it's called Pentecost, and it's the sending of, and on the tongues, it was supposed to be said, it settled on their tongues like the dew. And so the word dew is associated with the Holy Spirit. And El Rocio, the Virgen del Rocio, is almost equated with the Holy Spirit. She's also equated at other times with the shepherdess, which really gets controversial. So the dew, rosemary, is called a drop of dew in the sea, and other names. So rosemary, the pilgrimage flower, is also associated with dew. Here in Sarah La Kali, we have the marshes, we have the horses, the cult of the horse with the nightmare that's associated. We'll get that with the with however we want to call her, the Hecate or the moon goddess or some kind of mismatch of the two. But Sarah La Kali became the pilgrimage site for all the gypsies of Spain, of Western Europe. And so they gather there for a week. They gather there and they sing and dance, very similar to what they do with the Rocio. Find wives, find flirt, found wives, make deals with different families. It's a total cultural event. It used to be that the music of the of this period was what we call it hot jazz. It was the jazz of Django Reinhardt. He was the biggest gypsy musician. So the music that was played was the music of Django Reinhardt. Now,
so what is this? 1930? When is this? 30s? When is Reinhardt? I can't remember.
From the 30s into the 40s. Let me.
Should know this. I just don't like jazz. Yeah, so he's 1910 to 1953. So that sounds about right. Late 30s, probably into the 50s.
And he's interesting because he was involved in a fire. His wife or his mother was making all these paper flowers for a ceremony. He was in there. They caught fire. His fingers were melded together. They were going to amputate, and his family snuck him out of the hospital. And so he grew up. He was a violinist, and now he cannot play the violin. So he started playing the guitar. And so even though he's got this fantastic jazz style, he's doing it with two fingers meld together. He became very, very famous, and he worked with a Frenchman named Stefan Graffelli. So this was the music. Now, if you would, Oliver, you want to get the, that's all right. There's a music called about the gypsies. It's a video on the story of the gypsies done with vignettes, starting with India and ending in Spain. In one of these vignettes, they do a section in Eastern Europe where the gypsies are getting this cars and hitchhiking, blah, blah. They end up they're ending up at Marie-sur-la-Mer. So they're at a party. At the party, they're sitting around these tables, and they start playing. And when you hear the gypsy jazz, you'll recognize it. It's typical 1930s kind of Dixieland. And they're dun, 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 and they're playing and playing and playing. But then they show a scene of the same musicians in the crypt with Sarah Lakali. And there, everything is slowed down. If you analyze the harmony, what they're doing is they've taken the chord progressions and they slowed it down and made it into something devotional. So that now they change the very nature of...
You want me to play it?
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Hopefully everybody can hear it. Oops.
I'm not hearing anything.
Well, that means I won't get a copyright strike, right?
Well, you should anyways. I've put this many times in class.
Sorry, it's not playing through. There's something I have to do on playing through that I'd have to figure out, and I fear. Okay. Let me see. Right. I'll try. Let me try one time.
Or tell me real quick, what did you get it under?
Just type Lachodrome and Marie-sur-la-Mer. Let me see if there's something I have to hit for playthrough. Yeah, it's not giving me an option to play through. It just gives me this, and then nobody can hear it, apparently.
Yeah, they call it Chavolo swing. Chavolo is like gypsy swing. And
yeah, I'm good. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to link it for everyone as they suggest. So, let me share it, and I'll stick it in the chat, and people can check it out. But your point is basically that they've taken a jazz riff and they've made it devotional, right?
Exactly. And you'll see it's very beautiful. It's very devotional. And that's very similar to what I showed you with the Sevillanas by Miguel Parejo Obregón. The same thing. Because practice, this is one of the things I was working on, that emotional structure, behavioral or ritual structure, and musical structure form a triangle that you can't move one without moving the other. So if the behavioral or ritual structure changes, the music must change with it. You have no choice. You can't behave differently and play the music the way if you were behaving another way. So it's what I'm calling natural composition. You don't have to be a composer to do this. There's many examples of that being done deliberately. For those of you who are familiar with the evolution of Gregorian chant, you know this. Taking the tenor, taking the chant and stretching it out, and then writing the parts on top of it, and in the voice of the tenor, which is to hold it, and the tenor, and then the it's coming to me in a second. But anyways, so what they've done here is this is not done in a deliberate way. It's a result, as I saw and witnessed on the Rocio, of simply people changing their behavior and using the music to fit the behavior. And so the music becomes stretched out, slower, devotional. And then you'll see that, and you hear the hot jazz, you can imagine hot jazz, right? I mean, that's easy to imagine. And then if you hear this, you understand, when you analyze it, you'll see the score, it's basically the same chord structures. They've just been stretched out, and stretched out.
So the depth of the experience in a corresponding way deepens the music and basically expands the available musical canon to include the sacred, working with the bones of the traditions that are available to the people who undergo the experience.
Yes. Is it deliberate like that? Probably not, but yes, that's the results. Absolutely. That is the result.
I'm
And
just
when
trying to tie it back to your point about how it generates culture.
Yes, and then it will become popular, and this will become a music of the times. Now, so now we'll get on to, so what happened? Why is that music being played now at the Rocio? Not as much, because the rumba flamenco.
In this case, in Marie-sur-la-Mer, right? So
When
not
I say
Rocio. You
I'm
said
talking
Rocio,
about,
but this is
sorry.
so basically the early jazz aspect got replaced now by some rumberos, which you now need to introduce.
And this was because, for those of you who don't know anything about the Gypsy Kings, I'm going to play a song of theirs. Maybe it'll probably heard it in the background or something by them. And this one is not one of the devotional, but it's related to Sarah Lakali.
You just need to load it on screen for us.
So there you could see that there is that. Now here the Arab guy will say, "Oh, this is deliberately pointing out to Middle Eastern music. It's a deliberate trope that a lot of in flamenco they'll do this, and then they'll it can go either way. Very very Spaniard, very very Arab, which you could say okay Muslim, but really it's Middle Eastern, and we can have a big discussion on what is Middle Eastern music. All right.
Also, quite a bit of that is relatively recent, from like the 80s forward, where
Gypsies
begin to look to Arab influence, and they'll try to tell you that Olé comes from Allah and this sort of thing.
No, it's from French. Allez, to
right,
go.
Right.
Nobody would scream Allah in some of these circumstances. That would be very blasphemous. So you can see there that that's an upbeat rumba, and the rumba Catalan, which is what it's based on, is even harder. It's more and it's very upbeat and very powerful. But this is already getting softer. Now I'm going to play for you what has evolved from the Camargue, specifically the Camargue. Then I'll tell you the story of the Gypsy Kings. But you'll hear this, and the first lines are a divine love. Again, it's a love story, and we talk about how is it that love stories get entwined with love for the divine communion. This is a tradition both in the Middle East and in the West. And
and among the troubadours, certainly, all the way up.
Very big among the troubadours. And then El Amigo,
or Dolce Stil Nuovo with Guido Cavalcante and the rest, going all the way up into things like Dante writing about Beatrice, where love for a woman is also turns into an entire what do you call it? Would you say a cosmology, with the Inferno and Purgatory and Heaven, and you also see it, for example, with even the elements of Petrarch and Laura and the darts of love and all the rest. But sorry.
Yes, it's using the feeling, the love, focusing it, even if it's focused on an unattainable, like in the troubadours of a noble woman that you weren't supposed to touch, but you would cultivate this emotion. And it was meant to actually lead you closer to Christ and God. It didn't always work that way, but that was the idea. And so here you see it's a love song, but it starts off with the word a divine love. So let's do that.
And you'll want to make it full screen, I guess.
Yeah.
Un amor vivir llorando y me decía las palabras de Dios.
So the words that it starts off with, a love, a divine love. And it goes on. It's a kind of a love story. It's all right.
Palabra el Dios, what, the word of God?
La palabra me dio. You gave me your word, but and so here we go quickly. And so you can see that this evolved from the rumba catalan, which is very hardcore. Let's see if we can find.
And so you're going to put this in context for us in terms of the Django Reinhardt people having been replaced by another group of gypsies, right?
Right. This is exactly what happened. Okay. So here we go. Stop screen, blah, blah. Present, blah, blah. Share screen, blah, blah, varios. And this is just a ramble.
Voy a tratar de olvidar que un día fuiste mío. Voy con mi sueño a vagar.
De mal, si me decido.
This would be more.
Voy a tratar de olvidar que un día fuiste mío.
So you get the idea that that's the original rumba from Catalonia, Spain.
Right. It's faster. It's more upbeat. And
Yeah,
again,
Bambino,
we see that it's been
Bambino out there.
slowed down. It's been made deeper. Right.
So you can see where we went from the rumba catalan. Now, how did this transformation happen? Well, Manitas de Plata, which is he's a Frenchman, a French gypsy. His last name is actually Ballardo. He, during the Civil War, a Spaniard who was part Moroccan came up from Spain, and his name was Jose Reyes. And Reyes means king. He came up, and he was a flamenco singer. Very good singer. He comes up, and he gets together with a lot of expatriates from Spain, like Picasso was there. Picasso, Dali, everybody was there. And that's the time of Jean Cocteau and all these others. And so they hung out together, and they started becoming like a duo. And all of the cool intelligentsia hip people, like Picasso, like Jean Cocteau, and the expatriates, would invite them to their parties. So the gypsy kids, the children of the Reyes family and the Barrialdo, actually grew up around these people. And it's a very famous story that when Picasso, that sketch that people have seen of the Minotaur, the guy with the head of the bull, it's a very famous sketch. He did that sitting there at the party, came in, I think it was Tonino who came in, one of the children of the Gypsy Kings. And he looked at him, he goes, oh man, that's it, the Minotaur. And so he drew it on, I think he drew it on the guitar of one of the guitars. And then later on, he, made it into a sketch, and it became well known. So that's one of the ways. Reyes is a wonderful singer. If we have time, I'll play him singing. And Manitas de Plata just died recently. He's still completely silver haired. I'm in his 90s, and he'd still get up on New Year's and do this thing where he would play guitar in French television. Brigitte Bardot is friends with him. It's very famous. So any Frenchman, Manitas de Plata is a huge name. Jose Reyes was too in the time. They parted ways at some point, and then their kids, the Ballardo family, who are all guitarists after Manitas de Plata, which means silver hands, and the Reyes were the better singers, but they also played guitar. They got together and formed a group to go travel around, and that became what is now the Gypsy Kings. But prior to that, Manitas de Plata had waited his time for the Django to because out of respect, he didn't want to go in there and just start playing rumbas. What was at that time the music of the pilgrimage of the gathering of the culture was the gypsy jazz. Once Django was out, I think he passed away. Manitas moved in and started introducing the rumba, and that's how flamenco and rumba started to become very well known in the Camargue. But it's not, of course, it doesn't originate there, and they never became.
But it's a straight transplant of all that Spanish culture right in there to southern France.
Yes,
but
exactly.
As you know, there were weird ways in which there were already parallels with running with the bulls and breeding horses and the religious processions. So they had cultural overlap in some respects, even though they were very different spheres.
Well, the Spanish gypsies would go to the Camargue. This didn't begin recently. That's been going on for a long time. So you have this music now, the rumba, but as you heard in this last Rumba Catalan, eventually the Camargue, the pilgrimage changed it. And then we get this extremely devotional, beautiful, slowed out. And that slowed out process also happened, as we showed with the gypsy jazz, and it happened again with the rumba. So now there's a new kind of rumba that is slower, more romantic. It can be hardcore, but it also can be very romantic and very emotional. And that's become famous all over the world. I mean, maybe your audience doesn't know about them, but if you go to a lot of places in Europe, especially go to Europe or anywhere in South America, mention the Gypsy Kings, or the Middle East too. They're extremely well known. And they did something with, was it Hamid? What is the Jewish singer? They did that was
remember that when I was in Istanbul, there was I can't remember if it was a brother and sister group, but it was a female singer and a male guitarist, and they were doing basically Gypsy King style rumbas, and they got big there for a little bit. Yeah, and everybody had heard. I mean, it's particularly among accomplished flamencos, they can kind of look sideways because the ones in France are just playing rumbas, and when you hear them try to play a
and Manitas, they say, doesn't play in compás, but actually I heard him accompany a seguidillas with Reyes singing. It's very nice. Now he doesn't play bulerías, really. I mean, he can, but yeah, his compás is not great. He was never known for that.
Gypsy Kings became, to your point about the generation of culture, I guess that's what you're getting to really here, is that we got something like a rumba catalan, right? And then it gets deepened and made more heavy or more profound, right? I guess that just means deep. It's another
devotional,
way to say deep,
yes.
right? And devotional indeed.
Romantic.
And then that carries it forward to the next step. And suddenly that music, travels all around the world and all through the late 80s and through much of the 90s, I think it was. The Gypsy
it becomes very popular culture.
Pop, yeah.
Especially in France and Spain. And really, for our conversation, that's all it has to do. The fact that it's spread in this, is spread to the rest of the world is fine. But it was dominant in France, dominant in Spain, and the Sevillanas Rocieras. And literature comes out of this, especially in the Rocio. Literature, cuisine, clothing, and a reinvigorating of Catholicism. Rather than being a break with Catholicism or stretching it, it actually made Catholicism even more powerful in Andalusia. So you have this continuation of culture. Then there's literature that accompanies it, philosophical thoughts. It goes on, and that's just one pilgrimage that happened once a year, and it had that kind of effect on Spanish culture. And the Gypsy Kings, this one, Sara La Cali, and the Maurice La Mer, through this music, they've become known all over the world. Now, France is a little bit different because the secularism is so strong that the religious part is basically a gypsy thing. The gypsies
are trying to push
religious.
down hard on it with their what do they call it? Laïcité, right? They're very much into the secular state, and so they want to mash down on all of that. To the extent that I hadn't even realized how, I should, having heard of the Sun King, duh. But it's sometimes I forget France is just so heavily Catholic, because it's been so de-emphasized, and I guess they're becoming much less so at this point with the priests having their throats cut and the churches being burned. But yeah,
and then becoming increasingly ideological. They can't do these massive processions in France. The public wouldn't allow it. The state wouldn't allow it. In Spain, they still can. So public demonstration of religious faith in France is about gone. You have to do it privately. And this was, it wasn't meant to happen in this country either.
Well, unless you're Muslims praying in the middle of a crowded street in Paris. But yeah, I take your point. Yeah,
exactly. So, so now we can talk to you about the syncretism, how important it is. And really, to me, I look at it as this is the glory of the Catholic Church. See, other people say, oh my gosh, that's all paganism, that this, idolatry. Shut up. The Catholic Church is here for 2,000 years because they had a genius for bringing in the people, syncretism, bringing in the elements that were good, getting rid of what was bad, shaping it into a Christian, extremely Christian culture, interpretation. And it's worked for 2,000 years. Now we'll see if it's going to last that's a whole nother story. But it's the experiential level that you must have. And to the degree that the Catholic Church has lost that experiential level is the degree it's falling apart. Now in South America, they still do massive processions, pilgrimages. So Catholicism, in spite of liberation theology, in spite of communist revolutions, as a brief little story, there's a film of Pope John II going to Cuba. Castro was sure that he was going to show up John Paul II, that John Paul II would come there. And I don't know what he was getting in return to allow John Paul II come, but he set up a big, in a soccer stadium or baseball stadium. He paraded him through the streets. And this is the first time you will ever see Fidel out of sorts. He's sitting there in the front row, and the Pope is up there, and the people are absolutely ecstatic. And they were in the streets. So here he thought he had pretty much raised the state above the church, so the church could never overshadow the state. And to his surprise, actually it hadn't. It was alive and well. The Russians are finding that out because the rituals have come back. And we're seeing that now, of course, as I said, in China, culture is rejuvenating. Let's see if we can do that here in the West. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I prepared a bunch of notes, and there are all kinds of, cutenesses that I could review on my side as regard elements that came into this. You've got bull cults going back to, the land that time forgot. You've got bull dancing in Crete. You've got running with bulls. You've got bull fights, right?
Manolo Sanlúcar's album was dedicated to the cult of the bullfight. It's one of his best.
Right? And the gypsies that are producing both bullfighting families as well as musical families.
Yes.
But I almost, with the time that's left to us, I feel like stop me if you would prefer otherwise, but it seems to me that the real point here that's valuable, rather than looking for traces of syncretic elements in Catholicism.
Yeah, they're just there. We can explore them to whatever degree people want, and I think we pointed out the fact they're there. They're irrefutable. You can't ignore it.
And what interests me more is this top-down versus bottom-up. This, so syncretism is interesting to me insofar as it is something that overlaps in the Venn diagram, so to speak, with the bottom-up movement, right? So if there are habits and traditions, cultural, ethnic, and even biological predispositions that a group of people have, there is room within the Catholic, of course, meaning universal church, right, to accommodate things. Many people have discussed the cult of the saints and the rest, right? Everybody watching has probably heard about this in 10 different ways, right? So it's interesting to me that the syncretism is there, but it's interesting insofar as it's part of that bottom-up, experientially driven sort of lay brotherhood kind of aspect versus what you're talking about with the top-down ideological impositions. And for much of the history of the Catholic Church, I am certainly no expert on this. So, people, if you want to come attack me in the comments, I'm sure I deserve it because I'm out of my depth here. But it does seem to me that there has, across the history of Catholicism, been a considerable, how do I say that? It's a productive tension. Like even in flamenco itself, how we talk about what I probably am misnaming as a hemiola, right? But you've got a musical phrase, as you know very, very well with the compás, right? As you told me years ago, you go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. sorry, I'm doing a 9/8 beat. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2. That's basically your first half, as you well know, but for the audience, right? And they don't, like Gerard told me,
It's 3 plus 2. 1 2 3 2 3. These are threes, and then 1 2 1 2.
3 twos and 2 threes.
Exactly.
And they form a measure of 12. But the thing is that the tension that's created by the first half of the phrase is resolved in the second half of the phrase. And what gives it flexibility is that you can cut it and stretch it. So you can be like, bum, 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 right?
You can even go in the twos.
But you can stretch it endlessly and then resolve it. And the productive tension that creates the feeling is the open space where there's room for the business of what the fuck do you call improvisation, and yet the structure comes back down in the end and is what makes it pleasant, right? Whereas
and what makes it work, it makes it communal. Everybody can get involved because that compás has been internalized.
Us to walk in step, to do things together, the need of the rhythm in order to make these things happen collectively, whether you're hoisting a sail with a sailor song or marching with men in a line, singing cadences. It's the rhythm that makes it a basis for human collective action. But remember when I was talking about top down and bottom up, you've got the idea of improvisation, so to speak, as bottom up. And you've got the idea of top-down impositions as structure, and that fruitful interaction in the Catholic Church. I guess what I'm saying is, rather than talking about syncretic elements that came in, this part is what I'm most interested in, because I've given it a great deal of thought.
It is. And we see it in flamenco. When a new form comes into being, it's difficult. There are failures, like the rumba tango just really didn't go anywhere. Some others don't. They experiment. Tito's experiment. Well, it wasn't Tomatito, but the experiment with the group from Pakistan just didn't work. Whereas Tomatito's thing with the Moroccans did. El Herbijanos did. But what we have is that a new form can come into being, but it has to be scrutinized by the people, especially by the artistas. They'll do it over, they'll do it. You go, nah, that doesn't work. And you can get a new form like the Solear por Bulerías, right? At some point, somebody was, it was coming into being. They sped up a Solear and they're going, why would you do that? Da-da. And then collectively, rather than one of them just going away, there's the structure that's the top down saying, look, you got to maintain our communal identity, our structure. This is how we work within it. And yet something can bubble up and everybody go, oh yeah, that works. Okay, that's a new form. So in the Sevillanas Rocieras, you have this new music, you have this beautiful Rocio, all these elements that can look kind of, could look heretical to some people. The insanity there at the, at the end with the salida. And yet the Catholic, there's the church priest there, everybody's there. And over time, those elements of doctrine and experiential up movement come into reconciliation. And eventually you actually have a Rocio Mass. So it's gone all the way up. But it's
Wait
still
a minute. Do you mean, so to speak, a Rocio Mass, or some kind of mass that is
a Rocio Mass? A mass,
a specific mass celebrated for this pilgrimage?
No, I mean the music of the Mass is all Sevillanas Rocieras. Besides it's being celebrated for the people going to the Rocio, it's a mass conducted, the full mass, but all the music is Sevillanas Rocieras.
So basically, we're showing how the bottom up, let's call them improvisational, just for purposes of this conversation.
Well, that's what it is.
Bottom up improvisational elements prove their value in community building and in generating the religious experience, at which point the structure of the Catholic Church has enough flexibility to then accept them, even so far as to make them a part of the most central ritual.
Yes. That's when you know it's succeeded. When it's made its way into the Mass, there the whole cycle has been completed. And so in flamenco, when you now look at a flamenco tree of forms and everybody accepts the Solear por Bulerías, now it's just part of the repertoire. But as you know from being around flamencos, they're hard-headed. You can't just do anything and they're going to say, oh, that's cute.
No, you can do whatever you want as long as
they
it's
don't have
not
to like
the
it.
wrong
They'll let
thing.
you know.
Yeah.
That's not flamenco. You're not
Yeah, the
flamenco
shortest.
enough.
I joked. My joke that I always tell. You probably heard me tell it before, but I used to think that the shortest measurable unit of time was the amount of time that elapses between a light turning green in Istanbul and people honking at you from behind. It's not true. The shortest possible unit of time is when you fuck up on compas and somebody looks over at you like, what the fuck did you just do? You know,
Yeah,
it's
the worst thing.
absolutely like lightning speed. But let me ask another angle, because I just Red Hawk, who's sort of part of my wider AA crew, posted a thing. It's just a repost over on Twitter, and it was basically a guy who's playing a banjo, and this fox comes out of the forest and just sits down in front of him and listens to him play banjo. And then when the fox starts to go away, the guy stops playing music, the fox comes back, literally sits down in front of him again. It's like he asked for an encore, right? And if you look, there's one, you can find it on YouTube, and I posted some of these recently. One of my buddies on Twitter posted this one I'm about to mention, where a girl's playing a harp and a deer comes out of the woods to just listen, right? And then there are other ones where they, you got some kind of Swedish woman, standing out over pastures with Fords in the distance, and she's all like, doing some crazy ass Scandi shit, right?
Huge tradition. Sorry.
And the cows come.
Yes, and before that was the deer.
Right.
Yeah,
and you have it with guys playing a trombone, and they'll be sitting next to their field, and you'll just see empty grass as far as the eye can see. And then the guy starts playing his horn, and you see the cows just appear over the hill and just come rolling in. They're ones of guys playing piano for sheep. There's one where a guy's playing a cello.
Fake that and so I'm sure some of it's real.
But
right. But I have one myself. I was sitting there practicing guitar. It was at a military base with my family. I was just starting, medium, and I'm playing, and we're in a military base in one of they call the officers' quarters, and I'm sitting there in this little room. There's an air conditioner, and I'm playing, and I had this uncanny feeling something was watching me, and I looked over there, and there was this mouse sitting on the wire, just looking right at me. I don't know, but.
Well, somebody mentioned
I've always thought that he was listening, and he sat right there listening, and then I play a little more.
And we have every reason to believe that they are listening, because you can go on YouTube right now and see some, and you be the judge of it. To me, there's no question that the animals are responding to it, and it's not just because it happens to be in some pitch range that they're cognizant of, because some sound sounds like the lowing of cattle. No, they hear the music, and they want to come and listen. And I bring this up again because what we see is at this bottom-up level where you have this aspect of improvisation, and with music, it's very immediate. Like we don't have to go into it here, but you and I talked about it in the past about firstness and secondness and thirdness with Peirce, right? And the idea of the immediacy of the experience, right? It doesn't have these signification jumps that it needs to make with sets of associations that can be arbitrary, right? It's bam. You get hit by it. That's why you can hear music and just be like, fuck, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Crush their skulls under my iron-bound chariot wheels. Yes.
Exactly.
But you have both of these aspects coming up from below, and here you have this idea of improvisational music. And you have the idea that the music can reach, tame the savage beast. It's more immediate than speech, right? It does not, you don't need someone to translate music for you. Can you imagine someone telling you that this is how you're supposed to feel when you listen to it? You just laugh at them.
It was called music appreciation. They used to do that. That's how crazy that was.
They can fuck.
I have a really good example again with the University of Marxists. This idiot wrote this stupid, I don't even want to name him. And it was about why, white kids in rock and roll and all this stuff about it's because, marginalized blue collar work, blah, blah, blah. He went on and on and on, which once you look at all the musicians, they were everything. Some of them were wealthy kids, like David Lee Roth. Mick Jagger was not a blue collar. Everybody knows who knows anything about rock and roll or music. It happens like this. When I was a little kid, I was 11, 12 years old. I was in Venezuela and we're riding in a bus. And some kid was already a fanatical follower of the Beatles. We all had lunch pails then. He's beating out, I think it was She Loves You, Yeah, or something. And pretty soon, all of us were, She loves you, yeah. And it was just this visceral, ugh. And then my father brought, Rolling Stones and Beatle records. Nobody explained to me anything. I just listened to it. And there was this one riff that goes, it was a song was called Empty Heart. I had to close the door. I don't want to embarrass myself. I sit there in the mirror and I just had to go over that thing because I badgered my father to get me an electric guitar. And I put that record on and I would just sit there. The last thing I was thinking of was some political fucking bullshit. And whether or not I was marginalized, whether or not I couldn't find my voice. Oh, shit. Just what crap these people come out. And yet, did anybody bother to stop him and go, you obviously don't understand rock and roll at all, do you? Please shut up.
And this is
like flamenco. The first time you heard flamenco, was it explained to you?
No, hell no. It was like,
fuck no. It just grabbed you, right? Same thing with me. I went and heard Tuscallis playing for Maria Benitez dance, and I was just, holy damn.
And so what we have is this idea of the improvisational thing, and it very often expresses
I would say
itself
experiential too. Put that word in there. Experiential.
Absolutely. Experiential. I'm just saying improvisational in that metaphorical aspect, because the experiential aspect is what gives rise to what we would, to phenomena that we would call improvisational, right? And then you get into the whole idea of inspiration and what is it and when does it come and how does it come? That was one of those famous, right? How duende comes and whether or not somebody could get it sometimes. Mairena versus, I can't remember. There was a big argument back in the day over somebody who knew the canon and the forms better and executed them perfectly, but had less duende. And then the other guy, I can't remember who it was, but I can't remember who it was, but it was said that he would be more on and off, but when he hit it, it was absolutely crushing, right? Anyway, these are the experiential aspects. These are the ones that come from the bottom up. What we have by comparison, to come back to your points about ideological imposition, is text and the imposition of the ideology or the structure from above. Now, in the Catholic Church, it exists in creative harmony.
You're saying, however, from the top comes text, doctrine, myth.
Right, and it has its place within the Catholic Church. But take a look at something like Marxism.
Yeah. That's all they have is text. See, they only have text. Without revolution, they have nothing. So as soon as the revolution's over, all they have is text. All they have is ideology. It's text, language. And Nietzsche made it clear, do not confuse music with language. That was his big break with Wagner. They have text. It's a semiotic problem. You cannot generate with text. You cannot generate culture from ideology. But this, what I'm pointing to, has proven through the century. And we know this because every single culture on the planet, every single one, even village, is founded upon a ritual system, which is founded upon the varieties of the ecstatic experience or the religious experience. There is no exception to this. Anywhere in the world, you cannot find a single society or civilization that is not founded upon the activation of the mystical mind. Even if you think it's bullshit, it's okay. All right, humanity's bullshit. We can call this homo delusionalis, if you like, or homo, what I call mysterium. It doesn't matter. You cannot study humanity without understanding that that is the basis of civilization. There isn't any other. We have no other. We're experimenting with it now, and that would be a great discussion right there. With a new technological world, are we working around it? Or are we just going around in a circle? That's another subject. But yes.
But here's an aspect of this which is related, and we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to ask you about this because it matters to me. You came back from looking at things like the stuff with Rocio, and then you went out to Burning Man, and we talked about that. If anybody wants to hear about the Burning Man aspect, we did a stream specifically devoted to that. But leaving Burning Man aside, because to me, at any rate, it's not there. Some people could say it's not there yet. I'm just going to say it's not there. In looking at modern Catholicism, at least in the United States, and if you have any sense of it vis-a-vis other areas of Europe, do you see anything like what we have in Spain and in the Camargue? Is there anything in the United States that's like that? Does the church here have? Are there lay brotherhoods? I mean, didn't you say you went and there's a small Rocio that happens here in the U.S.?
Those are expatriate Spaniards, so that doesn't count. Those are Spaniards. That's Miguel Flores. He's wonderful.
They're just trying to keep their own thing going, right?
Well, I've got some plans.
Right. But otherwise, what do you see that the Catholic Church has
Catholic
this
Church
creative
is
tension of
inundated.
top and bottom?
It is inundated with ideology, deep experientialism. Even a rebellious church that was started in southern in Central Florida called Ave Maria. I wrote them and I started looking at them, and they're writing more books, or they're trying to return to Orthodox Catholicism. Okay, that's fine. That's a noble. It was a guy who founded Domino Pizza. He was sick of the way the church was going, so he sets up his own university. Okay, that's a good start. But then you look at what they're doing. What do we need? Another volume of interpretations of St. Augustine? Oh, we don't have enough. I mean, if that's what it took to create Catholicism, and people think that's what it did, and I'm trying to argue, all of that comes after the fact. You have the experiences, then you discourse, then you produce art, then you produce philosophical debate. But you start with experience. Without that, Ave Maria, I predict, will eventually become like Notre Dame. It'll become an intellectual center, which will not even produce Catholicism. And it's not. We're having a lot of trouble.
Do you remember? Do you remember that old? I'm not recommending any of this shit, but when I was very, very young, 19, I did my chaos magic thing, and you remember there was a Peter Carroll line, and it was about. It was basically, the line was, forget trying to get somebody to be an anarchist. The best way to achieve that is simply get him to throw the bomb, so to speak. And then post facto, he will come up with any number of rationalizations and superstructures and all kinds of texts to support and, justify what he did. First,
Right.
Get them to do it, get them to experience it. And then it becomes the seed of all these, I guess you could call them epiphenomena. I mean, from the perspective that you're talking about.
Well, it was the only hope that Marxism ever had, was the experience of revolution. But then once the revolution is over, then what? Then they start to implode because they have nothing but doctrine. And Peter Carroll was a pretty impressive guy. I still, there's some things, ideas,
just listening to him now, though, there's something, I think he comes from Bristol. I'm not sure, but I've listened to him. There's some old interviews, and I have to talk to some Brit people, but there's something about this. I can't even fucking do it. There's something about that. And I think it's Bristol. Don't get me wrong. I might be wrong, but there's something about that Bristol accent that just makes me want to I just hate it. There's a snottiness. Anyway, so when I hear his voice,
when we met him, he was impressive, and he was very receptive. Right? I played the.
Yeah, he was all right. He was all right.
The guitar part,
but I mean, but I was 19, and now I'm,
Yeah,
anyway.
And I was what, 28? No, I was 30 something.
So, first cross country motorcycle trip. Okay, so but to come back to this whole idea of the top down versus the bottom up, I guess what you're saying is we're not seeing that now.
No, it's so little that it's ineffective. What we're seeing is the Catholic Church diminishing, churches closing. The only churches that are filled are churches that are still Orthodox, still maintain religious experience in their schools. They've not let the ideology come in. There's one in Alexandria. And the churches that are, the people in it are Latin Americans or Koreans. And the Koreans are wonderful Christians. We should have a good discussion on that with the with some of the videos that I've been following on the Korean and wuxia from China and the Korean version, how Christianity has just blended into Korean culture seamlessly. It's really interesting to witness that. And so here the Koreans are extremely devout and they much more experiential. And the Latin Americans do processions, they do everything still. So yes, the Latin Americans are still, at least let's see what happens, see if they'll get polluted by the Jesuits and the rest. But that's the only hope I see so far.
And I have to note, there's one correction from Noah Solomon saying that the Tom Monahan, the Domino's Pizza guy, is actually charismatic, not traditional. So it's not a.
No. I don't know where he's getting that, but if you look at Ave Maria, their curriculum, it's not charismatic. Go there and look.
Fair enough.
Look,
I'm not here to take a position on it because I don't know either way. I'm just throwing the comment in. Now coming from the other direction, before I turn and ask you for like just closing thoughts in general to summarize everything that we've looked at this evening and the journey that you have taken us on. What about the Protestants?
The evangelicals are doing quite well. Huge.
Do they still have like really badass I mean, the shape note singing, to be honest with you, that's not my scene. But when I hear that, like, even if they're
not
just
religious,
doing,
they've become totally secularized. They don't pay attention to the fact that it's Christian. These are all
oh, the shape note singers are fucking oh no, don't tell me that. I'm never going to enjoy watching one again.
No, I love it. I know. No, I used to go to the meetings and everything, and except some of them would say, well, this one's too churchy and stuff like that. No, the only people now, and that's why the left hates them so much and vilifies them, are the evangelicals. Because you must be born again in the Spirit. You must experience conversion. You must experience. And they're really strong on that. And that's why evangelicism, the Gypsies, that the Philadelphia church is an experiential evangelical church, which is lots of Gypsies converted to that. Lole, not Manuel, but Lole converted to that. And that's very popular in the Gypsy. But in Africa, all through the Southern Hemisphere, evangelical Christianity is thriving. In Korea, it's thriving. Unfortunately, in America and in Europe, well, it was driven out of the Middle East through centuries of, Islamic warfare. And now with secularism and the socialists here, I don't see much hope for it, frankly, unless there is a powerful revival of experiential ritual. And I don't see it even on the horizon at this time. Everybody wants to go to Catholic U. It's abominable. Georgetown, are you kidding me? I could tell you stories about Georgetown. It's not even Catholic.
Well, certainly most people who went there interested me. Yeah.
No, they're not even Christian. It's ridiculous.
So,
no, the answer to your question is no, I don't see it. I don't see it at this time. The only people that are continuing the Christian culture are the evangelicals. Hate them, love them, whatever, but they're the only ones. And people like Bannon, right? I mean, he's trying to revitalize Catholicism. So was Mel Gibson, the crazy guy. But as long as they keep going the intellectual route, it won't happen. They must understand the strength of the Catholic Church was its massive ritual system. And its lay
brotherhoods.
Well, they're the ones that, as we talked about, well, maybe we should mention that before we go here. They are not priests. They are not formed by the church. The Rocio is not put on by the Catholic Church. People can't believe that when I tell them that. So who built that big, the big hermitage, the big church, and that beautiful, statue and all that gold? Who did that? The Brotherhood. The people built it. The church approved it finally, but they did not build it. And the Rocio is carried out by the Brotherhoods. And it's the Brotherhoods that I will argue when we have another discussion that actually brought the Brotherhoods mixed with the Druids, because the Druidic tradition was Brotherhoods. That mixture is what brought the Syncretism in Europe. It's how the Catholic Church spread throughout Europe. And I see the Rocio as a perfect example of that.
Well, wait. You're not saying that, Roman sodalities existed, military brotherhoods. In fact,
yes.
So the Mithraic groupings were military brotherhoods because Mithraism was widespread in the armies among the fighting men.
Yes.
You're not saying that Catholic sodalities and brotherhoods specifically owe their formation to Druids.
No, I'm saying that the Druids had a huge role in this because they converted. And so they started bringing their traditions into the church. And of course, the Brotherhoods, you're right, Roman solidarity, what's the word you used?
Sodality. Yes.
Sodality. We have to only trace what we can trace, though. And we can trace the Brotherhoods into the 16th, 14th, 15th century. So the Roman element would be hard to show, but I'm sure it was there. But we can trace the Brotherhoods as they exist now into the 16th century and 15th century and before. So that we know. And then if you go to South America, you will see the same thing happen.
So they've got hermandades or whatever all over South and Central America. Now, see, do you think, I'm sorry, we do need to wrap this up eventually, but just for the moment, this is too interesting to me because, on the so-called dissident right, there are a whole bunch of tradcaths, as they like to call them, right? And I count some few of them my friends. None of whom would call themselves tradcaths, but other people would call them that.
I have to just mention this before I forget. This cigar is called El Rey del Mundo. It's become my go-to cigar. I love it. Go ahead.
So do you think I don't know, what are the prospects? Are Catholic people thinking about the power of these lay brotherhoods? Have you seen any movement for do they even exist in the US? I mean,
no, and that's the diabolical little plot that I'm hatching in my mind. Because the South Americans are. And even remember in Santa Fe, they were there. Remember the thing about los penitentes, the ones that actually physically crucified up on the hills, back in the hills beyond Santa Fe? You probably didn't know about this.
No,
but there's a whole study of these people. They're all brotherhoods. The dances that go on all night and all day are on the border towns and stuff that are brought over. Those dances, they're called danzas. They're all brotherhoods and sisterhoods. So yes, in the Latin community, that could be the big backfire on the Democratic Party of Socialists bringing in.
Right, but I'm thinking more along the lines of not looking once again to people who've been imported to our countries for our own salvation, but rather,
exactly,
broadly speaking, I'm not talking about Christian salvation. I'm just saying, metaphorically speaking, for our own salvation, like just to take a break from constantly fucking looking to people who've been imported.
I don't like that. I'm saying we need another Great Awakening. I did some videos on the Great Awakening. I'm doing another one that will kind of bring it up to today's time. That's what I'm hoping will be ignited. Another Great Awakening in American society, because I've argued that the Great Awakenings created the America that we know.
Right. And I think certainly the America that we know, certainly. And you'd find even people like my buddy Turnip, who would come in, who's looked at things like the various Great Awakenings, not from the direction you have. You'd like him anyway. He's a musician as well, Lutheran. But see, I start to think about that, the idea of Catholics in the United States forming lay brotherhoods. And then I'm like, how do they break down, right? You're going to have a bunch of the immigrant ones that you reference, right? Coming from Central America, South America. I'd imagine you'd have shitloads of Irish. I'm just guessing, right? Irish descent. You'd have, no, I'm just saying.
Oh, no, we have Irish, Italian,
Catholics.
Polish.
Right. Polish.
Diana's from West Virginia. Italians and Polacks. That's practically most of the.
Can you imagine? I mean, I just can't. Maybe they already exist, but I can't even in my mind imagine a lay brotherhood full of Irish and Poles
doing processions.
Well, I mean, no, they've got the thing. I've come
they
to
still do some.
Well,
Diana remembers Holy Week processions done even in her youthful childhood. The Polish
in
procession.
West Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay, so they did, and we've seen that, and I think it's half a scam. The right wing government of Poland at this time, and go back and look at my last few videos on Prometheanism with Martin Zellner and Prude and Charlemagne, but they do have processions. They'll get 500,000 people out there in the street with flares.
National processions. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so that's a good. They still have that in them, and the Irish certainly they'll have like orange parades.
Still have a chance. Eastern Europe still has a chance. So I'm saying I'm not seeing it in Western Europe anywhere, and I'm not seeing
Irish still have processions, don't they? Don't the Protestants and the Catholics still do territorial processions?
They're territorial.
Right, but that's all right. Hey, start.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yes. But as the more socialist they become, the less it happens. The more secular they become, the more pan-European, European Union. I'd have to go see if they're still doing it. I don't know.
Right.
Obviously, in the 30s and 40s, that was a big deal. Huge.
There was a lot that was a big deal in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, those processions would end up in fist fights and shootings.
Yeah, or worse. Yeah. Okay, so it's wrong of me to immediately dismiss Poles and Irish as being a part of this, or Americans of Polish and Irish descent as potentially forming a part of it. I don't know. That whole idea of hermandades, whatever they call it in Poland, Sodalities, brotherhoods, lay brotherhoods. That seems to have enormous potential, which suggests to me, of course.
Well, the first trade union was the Knights of Columbus. I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus. I kind of, they don't do anything.
You have one of those. I have one of those swords that I used to like. I'd walk home from middle school and go to the junk store, and there'd be like a Knights of Columbus sword. One of the crappy dress swords.
No, I wasn't. I haven't been practicing for quite a while, and
all right. They didn't give you one of the swords.
No, I didn't get to that level. No, but I was curious to see if something could come of that, and I don't see it.
Interesting. So the brotherhoods in that respect have become trade unions.
Well, no, they weren't a trade union to begin with. In fact, they're a life insurance organization for Catholics. That's how it started. Yeah. They created the life insurance policies. That was part of and that's where most of their money comes from. The life insurance for Catholics, for somebody died, so that the Knights of Columbus would take care of her because he was a member, and they paid their dues, and they have a life.
And in fact, that's a straightforward old sodality practice. Like for military veterans who fought in the legions, they would buy in their sodality, and they would take care of their kids. So the
Masons did a lot of that too.
Right.
I've tried to look back and see where the Masons now, and it's really hard to tell. I just don't see anything of value. I could be wrong, but I'm not seeing anything of value coming out. It's certainly not populist. When I go to
certainly not producing its own music
or its own culture. No, they're talking about equity and going into help, social work. I'm going, Jesus, are you kidding me? I did a whole thing on I haven't done a video, but we can have that discussion. My work with what was called faith in organizations, and just what a scam, absolute scam, the equity racket and the social work. Not the average person working there. They're good-hearted. They think they're doing well, and they've done nothing for the Black community either. I mean, I was talking about a big Catholic organization I went and talked to the head, and they were kind of like a lay group actually, but social work started by a couple of Jesuits. I interviewed them. I talked to them. They had these big functions. Their big high society comes to them, and they have these big, balls where they celebrate, 30 years of working, for the disadvantaged and blah, blah, blah. There was the Soul of Justice put out by the Catholic Charities. It's a total farce. And then you look back, okay, if you had done some good, all right, I'd be with you. We're talking about Baltimore. What good has come out of whatever they've been doing for 30 years? Take a look at Baltimore.
It ain't working.
Is that not a joke?
Yeah, what a fucking dump.
What did they accomplish? I can even tell you a story. I won't do it now, but of just how weird it was that they had obviously done nothing because their neighborhood where they were located was dangerous. Come on. Right. In a mafia neighborhood, you didn't fuck with people. I've had many sons of mafia members tell me there was the safest place in the world neighborhood was a mafia neighborhood. Well, over there, you've got Jesuits running this, charity and all this stuff, and they're not even safe in their own neighborhood. Oh, please. Yeah. Nothing. They accomplished nothing. They've accomplished nothing.
Well, that's
catastrophe.
Rather than completely black pill myself, I do want to a number of very interesting tendrils going off from here. How a brotherhood is subverted as a social justice organization, which is native and inherent within it. If not perverted, it's a good thing, right? Because it's always a thing of taking the vice and transforming it into a virtue. The virtue is always the seed of the vice. The vice is always the seed of the virtue. You can go back to Prudentius and see that.
Well, I am developing some diabolical plans. I don't want to reveal them now, but
well, yes. Then
if we're going to succeed in the resistance, it has to be through culture. It cannot be ideologically driven, because that's exactly what we're fighting.
Also, I'm fucking tired of ideology. Yeah. So it's like get them to
march. Of the mind. It's a short circuit of the mind. I use the term feedback, right? The message goes into the speaker. The speaker bobs it out. The microphone picks it up. It gets put back through, amplified again, gets louder. This is what the brain does. When it gets into a ideological short circuit, it just spins faster and faster and faster around until it blows up. It goes nowhere. because it has no experiential undertone. Ideology
and
is
so
a disease, a mental disease, and they become an emotional disease as they spin faster. All I got to do is look at the left now. Look at these people. They're insane.
they're
We're
cutting shit
talking
off
about
of
insanity now, a mass St. Vitus's dance. We're talking about mass psychosis. These people are insane. And we look at them and they don't get it. A man with a woman with a penis.
Well, yeah. Well, let's be good. We're on YouTube. So yeah, there are a number of things about how brotherhoods can be and have been subverted, but it suggests to me a very interesting array of things, like what's to, you can identify them. There are barriers, but it does at least seem possible that existing brotherhood structures could be
absolutely
skinned and replaced, or gutted and replaced. But
the Great Awakenings, they started with people going into the forest, out away from social structure, cultivating the religious experience, and then coming back to affect society.
Yeah, you got to be very careful, because in these days, if you go out away from people into the forest, they'll call it a compound, and the next thing you know, someone's going to be setting your children on fire. So yeah,
it was temporary. And again, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. So what Nietzsche said, that principle of going into the forest, like the Dionysian, and coming back.
Absolutely. Or
leaving the social structure, as Victor Turner said. Leave the social structure to rejuvenate, to experience life at a deeper level. As Nietzsche put it, experience the paradox that lies at the heart of existence. And from there, things will evolve.
Right. And from there, the best way to break through the ideology is with music, with a form of communication that is far more immediate, I think, is a good takeaway.
We have to create culture, and the first voice will be music. Culture will emerge, and music will emerge with it.
That fucking Blake quote, feeling the infinite which was hid. Hang on. The infernal method was hid. Music vis-a-vis ideology. Yes. Where is this?
It's an oxymoron. Ideological music is an oxymoron.
No. Relative to ideology, music is like acid for Blake. God damn it, man. I need the acid. I used to have this committed to my memory, but I've had a fair amount of whiskey, and also I'm an old man. The doors of perception.
Well, I've entered Camargue. You're still behind.
No. Hang on. I have to get this out before we close, and you get your final comments.
I know you are contemptuous of
printing.
Cinnamon whiskey, but this is really good. And the round ball ice cubes I thought was ice cubes. They're not cubes, obviously.
Whatever works for you, darling. Okay. This is here where it is. So Blake was dealing with copperplate engravings. And where is the goddamn quote? I bet you know what? If I went to Yandex, I would find this shit immediately. Oh fuck. I search it and I get it in French. Can't I get this in my own language? In the language it was originally written in?
I think we should do a whole video on rather rule in hell than be a slave in heaven.
All right. Don't we see you always do this to me when I'm barely able to corrosives revealing the I fucking hate Google, man. This is not hard to find. Anyway, he says something basically about printing and the infernal method, and you put acid on the shit and it melts away apparent surfaces, revealing the infinite which was hid. But I can't find the exact quote because no one wants to include the part about printing, and Google sucks my ass.
Sounds good.
But it does seem to me that in some respect, music is in and of itself.
Voila, the ice ball.
All right, that's. Basically the music in and of itself is something that's like an acid that burns away the apparent surface and reveals the infinite which is hid. It tears through ideology. It goes through music will tear through ideology like a wood chipper.
Yes.
And so that's what's so fucking horrifying is just constantly you see people on the so-called right wing, and they're just, blathering about ideology. Shit, it happens to me. And music, on the other hand, just cuts right through it like a deer.
I'm not
will come out of the
seeing
woods
a real
to
musical
harp.
new musical culture. Look what rock and roll did. I get here's a quick story. I was doing an interview with Reza Pavlova. She's a gypsy singer from Macedonia, and she had a group with her. Right, this is part of the Lachodrome, when they actually from the movie spawned actual troops that moved from university to university, doing the same thing but with different people. So I'm interviewing her, and the interpreter was the keyboardist. She didn't speak English, and we're talking, and it comes out that his name is Elvis, and I said, well, he's from Greece. Elvis is probably a Greek name, and I said, Elvis, and he goes, Presley. Like, what other fucking Elvis is there? And I was like, whoa, some gypsy woman in Macedonia fell in love with Elvis Presley. This is the power that the best things we've ever done for the world has been our culture. It's not been our damn politics. Rock and roll has moved people all over the world. And ideology is freedom and creativity. And you can feel it in rock. That's why when guys
Absolutely. I'll put it on music in general. More generally, I'll lay it on music, not because I dislike rock and roll, but
yeah, it's music. Absolutely.
And I look back more and more. It's just basically the story of my life at this point is to review everything that came before and to discover that every bit of it is fucking paused. Now, that doesn't mean that all of it needs to be flushed, and everybody has to undergo this process to some degree if they're honest with themselves. But so rock and roll, the power of rock and roll, I think, is manifested itself in spite of the forces that attempted to harness and exploit it immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, what a pure thing.
Well,
Presley.
But we can't.
The king.
Elvis Presley. Okay, but so we should wrap this one up. But I want to give you the ability to review what you've covered here this evening and lay out your final thoughts for people. This is the first in our series, Music and Esotericism. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive us if it wasn't as, we didn't rehearse 200 times, so it wasn't the tightest performance, but I think the basic ideas are there and are of value to everyone who's been listening. There are going to be more of these, and we're going to look at different areas, different parts of the world, different ways in which music and esotericism come together. So with that as a background, Gerard, the idea that we're going to have a series of these coming up, and in review of what we just talked about this evening, I give the floor to you to come up with whatever you want to say in closing.
Well, good. Thank you. One of the simple things to keep in mind is that of all the arts, it's music that can, of itself, generate culture in a way that's so immediate. We know this because if you go to Africa and there are other places where the ritual itself is the performance of the music and its experience. That's why when you go down the street, you can pick people out. Not always, but you can go, oh, that guy listens to punk. I mean, obviously. That guy's grunge. You can't do that. You can't say, well, what poetry does that person listen to? What art does he appreciate or she? But music, you can tell a lot of times just by looking at a person. And then you'll see that there's a whole subculture. Many of the subcultures that we look at here in America are centered around music, hip-hop culture, which is very powerful. Maybe we could do one on hip-hop. I do have a lot to say about that. That's very interesting. Not good, most of it, but it's more interesting than you think, though. There were some good aspects in the beginning.
Absolutely. I can get into West African praise name songs and
Well, plus, you and I you might someday have to show
all right, stop right now.
Or what the really good
stop
with the Bach theme. What was that? Psychoactivate.
Yeah, no, just
So,
stop.
So they were saying that my position is we cannot ignore the religious experience if we want continuity. Without continuity, you have nothing. So to think that you're going to have a new ideology, the progressive right is going to take over or do this or do that. If you do not have culture, you do not have continuity. Without continuity, you have nothing. So what I'm trying to show, even with these two examples, the Rocio is just part of a larger ritual system of Catholicism. But if you look at it and study it, it just exploded. It exploded and created culture that spread all through Andalusia. And music was the first voice that they heard. But then I hope I convinced the audience just by listening to that little trope of going from mass all the way to salida. What's at the bottom of it? Deep experientialness, even hysteria, even I call it ecstatic experience. Without that, you will not generate culture. You must confront what Nietzsche called the paradox at the heart of existence. You must go into the force, even if that's just your own self in a room. That's
right,
that's
but that's Dionysian, so to speak.
It is Dionysian. That's what
but to be fair, would you not agree that there are aspects of this that could likewise lead to a profound calmness? Like, it's not necessary that you must imagine that the music must turn you into a Maenad in order for the experience to be genuine, right?
Have you ever listened
it could be the deepest form of contemplation.
It found musics in the world, Zen meditation. And what I saw in those two guys hugging each other, the world around them must have been silent. We were sitting there hearing the bells and the screaming, but I bet for those few seconds that they embraced, the world was still. The world was silent. There's different ways to the mass. Most people cannot tolerate meditation for a long period of time, fasting and all that. Nonetheless, it doesn't have to be. I think I know where you're going. It doesn't have to be this, grand, explosive kind of, hysteria.
Right, and it certainly can be, because I've seen it. But I've seen it
characterized by that. That's what it was. People, laugh if you writhing on the floor, speaking in tongues, whatever you call it, whatever you like. You must encounter the paradox at the heart of existence, and we must do it as a people and as individuals. And without that, there is no future, because there's no continuity. If we can't generate culture and all we're doing is thoughts and ideology, it will go nowhere.
Yeah, life and death, I think, is the paradox at the heart of existence, and I can't agree with you more. I think that everything started to go downhill. I think everything, to be quite honest, started going downhill when we stopped washing our own dead. I mean, because there is one of the most fundamental rituals of being alive, and of death as well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, not to get too heavy. So music and that's
not the only thing Irish and other people did. That was just one poignant moment, but they lived their lives moving through rituals and experiences at different level, always relating themselves to divine. The divine, the mystical mind starts with relating the human to the divine. The craziness is that we think, because biogenetic structuralism, we'll talk about that another time, it's in our bodies. Our bodies are made to have this experience. Everybody has it to different degrees. Some people negate it, don't. But society is founded upon the concept that we are capable of direct divine communion. And then our society follows from there. The self to the divine, then the self to society, the self to the operational environment. That happens afterwards. First, the relationship to the divine, and then everything follows from there. And we've got it ass backwards. We're thinking we can do away with the divine and simply start ordering society in an ideological, logical manner. It implodes. The Soviet Union imploded. China is now, they've learned that lesson. Let's see. I don't know how far they'll go with it. But
yeah,
the divine is first, and everything follows from that. Without that, there's no continuity. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I think it's a fine one. And in comparison, who is that guy? Is it Yoel Hariri? I want to say his name is. Who's that?
Oh my God, the maniac. That's one of the right hand. He's on this World Economic Forum guy.
I probably got them mixed up.
Somebody.
One of them got up recently. I saw the clip going around, and he's got like.
The new bread and circus. It's metaverse.
He's got a screen in the background, and it's showing a bunch of fucking stupid ass programmer code, and he's up there with his accent from a certain country, and he's explaining to everyone that if I've got the guy right. And if I don't, it doesn't matter, because you can like they're like fucking nits that you pick off yourself. They're fucking everywhere. But he's up there talking about how, we're now gonna, we're gonna be responsible for our own evolution. And he's basically, puking up another one of these fucking, transhumanist
Right. But have you studied what he's got in mind? It's worse than that.
But see that, but yeah,
it's worse than what he's saying.
Don't black pill me. I'm just basically saying we can't go down this road because I want to wrap this up. But the main point is that, as opposed to this direct experiential aspect, which you keep hammering, you keep saying,
yes,
experiential, direct communication,
divine communion,
right? Which really comes down to grace.
That's the path, divine communion, symbolic,
and this is being countered with the idea that we're going to like run strings of code on a display screen behind us while we explain to people how we're going to stick your fucking brain in a jar. Like, yeah, I'm not going to go down. I've had several whiskeys and I'm going to get very dark about this.
It is dark. It's demonic.
Yeah,
it's dark.
It's horrifying.
Rather rule in hell and be a slave in heaven.
Yeah.
I've looked at that guy. He's maniacal.
Yeah, and there are 100 more like him.
Like I said, buddy. He's like his second hand. That's one of his favorite people.
It's like, yeah, picking ticks off a dog. Well then, I think, let me just look at my notes. We can tease the next one. And on this next one, I can contribute a little more. I certainly don't have your experience, and the audience should know as well. I don't have the background in music. I've hung out with musicians now for much of my life, mostly because Gerard introduced me to them. But I understand rhythm, but not melody. So that's like, as I often say, it's like sketching instead of being able to paint. I don't know, man. So you do contras, man. A lot of people can't do that. But what we have coming up is something I can contribute to a little bit, as I couldn't hear, because I lived for a time in the East and I've looked into some of the Turkish and Sufi, heterodox Sufi traditions. I think we're going to be looking at Islamic esotericism in music. Hopefully on this next one, we'll have an opportunity to look into, for example, how the rhythms are taught with the Turkish usuls, which have their own relationships with the Indian traditions of memorizing the ever more complex rhythmic schemes, maqams and ragas. Although I'm not jumping into the Indian thing because that's even beyond me. We can, maybe you can do that.
I was with the Jirakis and some interesting things. That was good people, right. Really good.
I also want to look at Gurdjieff, who's interesting to me, particularly for his experimentation with dance. Again, for the same reasons that we talked about music here, I'm very much interested in dance because of its immediacy. You and I have talked many times about the way in which the lyrics of this song give you the verbal aspect, but carried within a chromatic framework of the melodies and harmonies. We've talked about how the melodies likewise come with the instruments. We've talked about the rhythm that provides that deep structure, as we talked about this evening. And we talked about how dance shows the body postures and the positions and a whole other dimension of communication, and how those three things are embodied in flamenco. Once upon a time, when they were still doing tap dance, you had it in jazz, but they've since over-intellectualized jazz and pulled out the physicality of the dance. But Gurdjieff, if you look at like meetings with remarkable men, it has a number of dance programs that are shown.
Well, there's the Mevlevi, the Rumi Mevlevi, and the spiral.
And the whirling, yes.
That's one of the most fascinating, yeah.
I still have a pair of the little Mevlevi slippers, and I had one of them in Istanbul explain to me about how you nail a fucking nail into the floor and leave enough of it sticking up to put your big toe and second toe around it. And that's what you whirl around to develop your practice. But Gurdjieff in particular is interesting because in many of these dances I've now seen reflected, and some few of them are some crazy ass Jewish dances. which I did not realize before until somebody posted some. Not all of them, but at least one of them. There's also the Persian aspect of Zurkane, the House of Strength, where you have working out. It's Persian wrestling tied to Indian wrestling, and they're dealing with these big ass fucking Indian clubs and doing spinning exercises and all kinds of movements, but they're timed to. There's a Persian name for a Dumbek. Or
we're going to limit it to the Middle East, right? For now, for this conversation.
Islamic esotericism, but basically
right.
Asia
otherwise,
Minor, Middle East.
I could go to Indonesia with the. We should stay there. There's enough there, enough great.
And honestly, just because, no offense, I'm not that into Arabs. So like we could even frame it with the Islamic Balkans, the Islamic Asia Minor, Anatolia, and Persia.
Well, the Sunnis will not recognize music as holy, and so there is no tradition on the Sunnis. It's only Shia. The Sunnis,
heterodox Sunnis have it.
It's frowned upon heavily.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, and the Sunnis will say that they're not even truly Muslims, right?
No, that's what they say. That's what they say about Sufism in general, unless it's the really militant, vicious ones that ransack the Hindus' temples. But that's not really, as we understand Sufism, that's not Sufism.
Right. But we're going to look at that. So there's Persian, the Caucasus, and maybe in future episodes we can look at Tekes and the Balkans and the brotherhood houses of the Muslim brotherhoods, the Tekes, which have their own sort of odd relationships with Masonry. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is a potential thing in the future.
We'll cover that.
Somebody just said Persian wrestling stream with academic agent. Can you imagine AA wrestling? Sorry, just the idea of AA on the floor doing like jujitsu. Anyway, okay, G-Man, thank you very, very much, brother, for joining us. And you know what? We should also put together a right-wing crew of freaks, and I want to go to Spain and do the Rocio.
Absolutely.
We should do that.
It's an experiential. It stays with you the rest of your life. We've got to do it. We've got to go.
All right, we will. That is a deal. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Very much indeed. And we will hook it up in future. Ladies and gentlemen, you will see 2 links. One for the Society for Music, Ritual, and Experience for Gerard, and you'll see another one
for initial stages, but they can look at it and see where I'm going. And
then there's your YouTube channel, and then there was one I missed. What is that one? The other website?
Well, it's the Jolly Scholar 888 website, because my music's on there. But some of it is on Jolly Scholar YouTube, Jolly Scholar 888 YouTube. But I have a jollyscholar888.com website. They might find they might.
Oh, shut the hell up.
All right, maybe you don't want to put that on there.
Shut the hell up. All right, now we've driven everybody over there. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining this evening. It's very, very good to have you on. I appreciate you hanging with us. This was an esoteric topic, but one that's of great interest to me. We will be back again soon with another one in this series. Again, thank you all. Until next time, I am Semi-Agog, and I am out.